A chilling telegram arrives at Hercule Poirot's London flat, signed only A.C. Agatha Christie herself. It warns of a deadly plot in Devon, with just 7 days until the final page is written. A vanished writer, Margaret Lorne, holds the key to a sinister conspiracy. Why has she disappeared? What secrets lurk in her unfinished manuscript, the fatal deadline? Poirot races to Blackwood Manor, where jealous authors, cryptic ciphers, and a shadowy literary society called the Quill weave a web of deceit. Each clue-hidden rooms, poisoned pens, a rigged gala pulls him deeper into a plot to silence a literary legend. Can Poirot's little gray cells unravel the truth before the deadline claims a life? Suspense builds as every chapter reveals a new twist, leading to a shocking revelation. Is Christie the victim or the mastermind? Chapter 1. The Mysterious Telegram. The rain pattered against the tall windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat, a gentle percussion that underscored the quiet ticking of the ormolu clock on the mantel. It was a dreary November evening in 1925, the kind that wrapped the city in a shroud of mist and melancholy. Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit with a crisp white shirt and a neatly knotted tie, sat in his favorite armchair, a cup of tisane steaming on the table beside him. His small, fastidious hands held a leather-bound volume of Balzac, but his eyes, sharp and green as polished jade, were distant. The little gray cells, as he so often called them, were restless, craving a puzzle to unravel. The flat was a study. In order, polished mahogany furniture, shelves lined with books arranged by height, and a silver tray of biscuits placed at a precise angle. George, Poirot's valet, moved silently through the room, adjusting a curtain that had dared to slip a fraction from its proper place. The air smelled faintly of lavender polish and the rich herbal scent of Poirot's tisane. It was a scene of perfect calm, yet Poirot felt an itch, a premonition that something extraordinary was about to disrupt his meticulously ordered world. The interruption came at precisely 6:47 p.m., heralded by a sharp rap at the door. George, ever the model of efficiency, glided to answer it. He returned moments later, holding a silver salver with a single telegram. Poirot's eyebrows arched as he took the envelope, noting the crispness of the paper and the faint scent of ink. He slid it open with a pearl-handled letter opener, his movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. The message inside was brief, but electrifying. 7 days until the final page is written. Danger awaits in Devon. Seek the vanished scribe, A.C. Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his intrigue. The initials A.C. danced in his mind like a tantalizing clue. Agatha Christie, the rising star of detective fiction, was the most obvious candidate, but Poirot was not one to leap to conclusions. The phrasing literary, almost theatrical, suggested a mind that delighted in the art of storytelling. The mention of a vanished scribe and a final page hinted at a mystery cloaked in the language of novels. And Devon? That was a stage far removed from London's bustle, a place of windswept moors and hidden secrets. George, Poirot said, his voice crisp with purpose, prepare my traveling case. The tweed suit, I think, and the heavy overcoat. We depart. For Devon on the morning train. Very good, sir, George replied, his tone as neutral as ever, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of curiosity. Shall I inform Inspector Japp of your plans? Poirot considered this, his fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. Inspector Japp, his old friend from Scotland Yard, was often a useful ally, if occasionally baffled by Poirot's methods. Yes, George. Send a note to Japp. Ask him to meet me at Paddington Station, 8 a.m. sharp. And George packed the small notebook. I suspect I shall need it. As George retreated to fulfill his duties, Poirot leaned back, the telegram held delicately between his fingers. His mind raced, piecing together the sparse clues, 7 days. A deadline, perhaps literal, perhaps metaphorical. A vanished scribe, likely a writer, given the context. And A.C., the shadowy orchestrator of the summons. Was it a cry for help? Or a challenge? Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. He relished a challenge, especially one wrapped in such enigmatic wrapping. Sleep did not come easily that night. Poirot lay in his pristine bed, the silk sheets cool against his skin, his thoughts a whirl of possibilities. He imagined a secluded Devon estate, its halls echoing with secrets. He pictured a writer, perhaps desperate, perhaps cunning, caught in a web of their own making. And always the initials A.C. loomed large, a signature that promised both danger. And the light morning broke with a watery sun struggling through the London fog. Poirot, dressed in his tweed suit and a heavy overcoat, stood at Paddington Station, his small suitcase at his feet. The platform buzzed with activity. Porters hauling. Luggage, commuters clutching newspapers, and the occasional shriek of a whistle piercing the din. Poirot's eyes scanned the crowd until they settled on a familiar figure. Inspector Japp, his bowler hat slightly askew, his coat rumpled from a hasty journey. "Poirot, you old fox." Japp called, weaving through the throng. "What's this? About a telegram and a jaunt to Devon? Got one of your hunches, have you?" "Not a hunch, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice smooth as polished marble. "A summons, observe." He handed Japp the telegram, watching as the inspector's brow furrowed. "A.C., eh? Sounds like Agatha Christie to me," Japp said, scratching his chin. "She's been making waves with those detective stories of hers. But why drag you into it? That, Inspector, is what we shall discover," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "The train leaves in 10 minutes. You are with me, oui?" Japp grinned, a touch of mischief in his expression. "Wouldn't miss it for the world. But I warn you, Poirot, if this is some literary nonsense, I'll have your hide." A journey to Devon was a study in contrasts. The train's rhythmic clatter soothed Poirot's nerves, while the passing countryside fields of damp green, hedgerows blurred by mist, stirred his imagination. Japp, less enamored of the scenery, peppered Poirot with questions, but the detective remained cryptic, offering only that the telegram's urgency suggested a crime in progress, or one yet to come. They arrived in the village of Ashburton by midday, the air sharp with the scent of wet earth and wood smoke. The station was little more than a platform and a ticket office, its sign weathered by years of coastal winds. A local cab driver, a wiry man with a face like crumpled leather, drove them to the village inn, the Golden Quill. The name struck Poirot as significant, a nod to the literary theme of the telegram. He made a mental note to investigate its origins. The inn was a charming affair, with ivy-clad walls and a low-beamed ceiling. The landlord, a stout man named Mr. Treadwell, greeted them with a hearty handshake and a curious glance. "Not often we get London folk out here," he said, wiping a glass with a cloth. "You here for the festival?" "Festival?" Poirot asked, his interest piqued. "Aye, the Ashburton Literary Festival," Treadwell replied. "Starts in a few days. Writers, poets, all sorts coming to Blackwood Manor. Bit of a to-do, if you ask me." Poirot exchanged a glance with Japp. Blackwood Manor. The telegram's mention of a Devon estate suddenly took shape. "Tell me, Monsieur Treadwell," Poirot said, his tone casual but probing. "Has a writer by the name of Margaret Lorne been seen here recently?" Treadwell's face clouded. "Margaret?" "Aye, she's one of our own. Lives in a cottage up by the moor. But she's not been about for days. Folks say she's gone missing. Odd that. She was set to speak at the festival." Japp leaned forward, his notebook already in hand. "Missing, you say? When was she last seen?" 3 days ago, at the manor," Treadwell said, lowering his voice. "She was at a fancy dinner with some literary types. Next morning, her cottage was empty. Not a soul seen her since. Poirot's mustache quivered, a sign of his mind at work. "And this dinner," he said. "Who attended it?" Treadwell shrugged. "The usual sort, Mr. Harrow, the publisher from London. Miss Evelyn Gray, that sharp-tongued writer who fancies. Herself the next Christie. And a playwright, Mr. Dutton, all brooding and dramatic. Oh, and a few locals, but they're harmless." Poirot filed away the names, each a potential piece of the puzzle. "Merci, Monsieur Treadwell. You have been most helpful. We shall take rooms here, and perhaps a cup of your finest tea." As Treadwell bustled off, Japp leaned close. "Sounds like a proper mess, Poirot. A missing writer, a cryptic telegram, and now this literary festival. You think it's all connected?" "Mais oui," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. "The telegram speaks of a vanished scribe. Margaret Lorne, I suspect, is our scribe. And the final page suggests a climax, a denouement. We have 7 days, mon ami, to prevent a tragedy." Their tea arrived, served in delicate china cups that seemed out of place in the rustic inn. Poirot sipped his, savoring the warmth as he studied the room. A group of locals huddled by the fire, their voices low but animated. A young woman in a corner, her face half hidden by a scarf, scribbled furiously in a notebook. Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting the nervous flick of her pen. Was she a writer, too, caught in the same web as Margaret Lorne? After settling into their rooms, Poirot's a model of tidiness. Japp's already cluttered with papers. Poirot proposed a visit to Margaret's cottage. The cab driver, eager for another fare, drove them along a winding lane flanked by gnarled oaks and bracken. The cottage stood alone, its thatched roof sagging under the weight of time. The door was ajar, a detail that set Poirot's nerves on edge. Inside, the cottage was a writer's sanctuary, shelves crammed with books, a typewriter on a cluttered desk, and papers scattered like autumn leaves. Yet there was order beneath. The chaos, a sense of deliberate arrangement. Poirot's eyes swept the room, pausing at an overturned ink bottle, its contents staining a blotter. Beside it lay a manuscript, its title stark against the white page, The Fatal Deadline. Japp whistled. "Looks like she left in a hurry, or someone wanted it to look that way." Poirot nodded, his fingers tracing the manuscript's edge. "Observe. Japp, the ink is dry, yet the bottle is freshly spilled. A staged scene, perhaps, to suggest a struggle. But the rest of the room, it is too orderly. Our scribe, she is clever." He leafed through the manuscript, its pages filled with a tale of murder and betrayal. Passage caught his eye, underlined in red. "The truth lies in the 3rd act." Poirot's lips curved into a smile. "A clue, mon ami. Margaret Lorne, she plays a game with us. Or with someone else." Japp frowned, flipping through his notebook. "So, what's the plan?" "We've got a missing writer, a dodgy telegram, and a manuscript that reads like a confession. Where do we start?" Poirot straightened, his posture as precise as his thoughts. "We begin at Blackwood Manor, where Margaret was last seen. The dinner, the guests, they hold the key to her disappearance. And we must move quickly, Japp. The clock, it ticks. 7 days, and the final page approaches." As they left the cottage, the wind carried a faint rustle, like the turning of a page. Poirot paused, his eyes scanning the moor. Somewhere out there, a story was unfolding, and he, Hercule Poirot, would be its reader and its solver. The chapter closed with a vow, unspoken but resolute. He would unravel this mystery before the deadline, or the consequences would be fatal. Chapter 2. The vanished novelist, the train to Devon, had rattled through the English countryside, its rhythm a steady counterpoint to the whirl of thoughts in Hercule Poirot's mind. The telegram, with its cryptic warning and theatrical flourish. lay folded in his waistcoat pocket, a constant reminder of the puzzle awaiting him. The initials, AC, danced in his thoughts, teasingly ambiguous, yet undeniably deliberate. As the locomotive slowed, puffing steam into the crisp morning air, Poirot adjusted his pristine Homburg hat and stepped onto the platform of the quaint Devon village of Ashwick. The station was modest, its wooden sign weathered but proud, and the air carried the faint scent of salt from the nearby coast. Inspector Japp, ever reliable, stood waiting, his overcoat flapping in the breeze, his expression a mix of exasperation and grudging admiration. "Monsieur Poirot," Japp greeted, tipping his hat. "You've a knack for turning up where trouble's brewing. This one's a right mystery, I'll give you that." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of amusement. "Trouble, my dear Japp, is merely a puzzle in need of order. Tell me, what do we know of this vanished writer?" Japp gestured toward a waiting car, a sturdy Morris with a driver who looked as though he'd rather be anywhere else. As they climbed in, Japp began, his voice low to avoid the driver's ears. "Margaret Lorne, 42, novelist. Writes those twisty mysteries, not unlike your friend Mrs. Christie. Lives alone in a cottage just outside Ashwick. No family, no close friends to speak of. Last seen 3 days ago at a literary do up at Blackwood Manor, then poof gone. Locals are in a tizzy, and the press is sniffing about." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing as he gazed out at the rolling hills, their green slopes dotted with grazing sheep. "And the telegram? You have seen it?" Japp produced a crumpled copy from his pocket, handing it over. Poirot unfolded it with care, rereading the words he'd already memorized. 7 days. Until the final page is written. Ashwick holds the key. A C. The paper was cheap, the ink slightly smudged, but the message was precise, deliberate. "Most curious," Poirot murmured. "The phrasing, it is dramatic, non? As if penned by one who crafts stories for a living." "You think it's her, don't you?" Japp said, squinting. "This a C business. Agatha Christie's got her fingerprints all over it." Poirot raised a hand, his expression enigmatic. "Let us not leap, mon ami. The initials may be a coincidence, a misdirection, or perhaps a signature of intent. First, we must see this cottage of Mademoiselle Lorne." The car wound through Ashwick, a village that seemed plucked from a storybook. Stone cottages with thatched roofs lined the narrow lanes, their gardens bursting with late summer roses. Villagers paused to stare, their curiosity thinly veiled, as the car pulled up to a small, ivy-clad cottage at the edge of a copse. The place was charming, almost too perfect, with a low gate and a path of slate stones leading to a blue-painted door. Yet something was amiss. The windows were shuttered, and a stillness hung over the scene, as if the cottage held its breath. Inside, the air was cool and faintly musty. Poirot's sharp eyes took in every detail. The polished oak floor, the neatly arranged furniture, the bookshelves groaning under the weight of novels and journals. A typewriter sat on a desk by the window, its ribbon slightly askew. Beside it, a single ink bottle lay overturned, its contents pooling in a dark stain across a blotter. Poirot bent closer, his gloved finger hovering above the spill. "Fresh," he noted, "no more than 2 days old." "The ink has not yet fully dried," Japp grunted, peering over his shoulder. "Careless, that. Writers are usually particular about their tools." "Precisement," Poirot said, straightening. "This is not carelessness. It is a sign, a message left for those who would look closely." He moved to the typewriter, where a half-finished manuscript lay, its pages slightly curled at the edges. The title, typed in bold, read the fatal deadline. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Theatrical, non? The title mirrors our telegram's warning. Let us see what Mademoiselle Lorne was writing." He lifted the top page, scanning the text. It was a mystery, predictably, with a cast of characters that felt oddly familiar. A detective with a penchant for order, a vanished heiress, a scheming butler. But the prose was sharp, the dialogue laced with a knowing wit that suggested Lorne was more than a mere imitator of Christie. The final paragraph ended abruptly. The truth, as always, lay buried in the third act, waiting for the one who could see beyond the curtain. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The third act, he murmured. A clue, perhaps? Japp, meanwhile, was rifling through a drawer, producing a handful of letters and receipts. Nothing out of the ordinary here. Bills, a note from her publisher. About royalties, a thank you from the local library. Woman lived like a hermit. Poirot's attention shifted to a small photograph on the mantel, showing a younger Margaret Lorne standing beside a woman with a sharp, intelligent gaze. The resemblance to Agatha Christie was striking, though the woman in the photo was not her. A sister, perhaps? Poirot mused aloud. Or a mentor. This connection, it may be significant. Before Japp could respond, a knock at the door startled them. A young woman stood there, her apron dusted with flour, her face pale. "Beg pardon, sirs," she said, twisting her hands. "I'm Elsie, the maid from up the lane. I heard you was asking about Miss Lorne. I saw something odd last night." Poirot gestured for her to enter, his demeanor calm but inviting. "Mademoiselle Elsie, what you have seen may be of great importance. Speak freely." Elsie hesitated, glancing at Japp's stern expression before focusing on Poirot's encouraging nod. "It was near midnight, sir. I was coming back from the pub. Don't tell my mum. Mind when I saw a figure by Miss Lorne's gate. All in black, they were, with a hood. Didn't see their face, but they moved quick, like they didn't want to be seen. Went round the back of the cottage and vanished. I thought to tell someone, but, well, folk round here don't like to meddle." Poirot's eyes narrowed. This figure, they carried something? A bag, perhaps, or a weapon? Elsie shook her head. "Couldn't." "Say, sir?" "It was dark, and I was a bit spooked. But I swear they weren't just passing through. They were up to no good." Japp scribbled in his notebook. "Right, we'll have a look round the back. Could be footprints, if we're lucky." Poirot thanked Elsie, who scurried off with a nervous glance over her shoulder. Outside, the garden was a tangle of roses and lavender, the earth soft from recent rain. Japp crouched by the back door, pointing to a faint impression in the mud boot print, narrow and deep. "Someone was here, all right," he said. "Not a local, I'd wager. These are city boots, expensive ones." Poirot nodded, his gaze sweeping the garden. A low hedge separated the cottage from the neighboring wood, and something caught his eye. A scrap of fabric, black as night, snagged on a thorn. He plucked it free with a handkerchief, holding it to the light. "Silk," he said, "not the attire of a common prowler. This was someone with means, someone who wished to remain unseen." Back inside, Poirot returned to the manuscript, flipping through its pages with meticulous care. Near the end, tucked between two sheets, was a folded note, its edges worn as if handled often. He unfolded it, revealing a single line in Lorne's precise handwriting. "The truth lies in the third act." The words were identical to the manuscript's final line, but the ink was different red, bold, and deliberate. Poirot's pulse quickened. "This is no coincidence," he said. "This note, it was meant to be found. Mademoiselle Lorne has staged her disappearance. I am certain of it." Japp frowned, skeptical. "Staged? Why go to all that trouble? If she's hiding, she's doing a blasted good job of it." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "She is a writer, mon ami. Her life is a story, and this disappearance is but the opening act." She wishes us to follow her clues, to unravel her plot. The overturned ink, the manuscript, the note-all are breadcrumbs, leading us to the truth. Japp sighed, rubbing his temples. You and your breadcrumbs. What's next, then? We can't just sit here reading her stories. Poirot's eyes gleamed with purpose. We go to Blackwood Manor, where Mademoiselle Lorne was last seen. The guests at this literary soiree, they will have answers. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall find them. The drive to Blackwood Manor was short but scenic, the road winding past hedgerows and ancient oaks. The manor itself was a grand affair, all stone and ivy, its windows glinting in the late morning sun. As they approached, a gardener paused his work, eyeing them warily. Poirot noted the man's calloused hands and the faint tremor in his grip, a detail to store away for later. Inside, the manor's hall was a study in opulence, with polished floors and portraits of stern-faced ancestors. A butler, stiff as a board, greeted them. "Mr. Harrow, the publisher, is in the library," he said, his voice clipped. "He's expecting you." Poirot exchanged a glance with Japp. "Expecting us, you say? Most interesting." The library was a cavern of books, their leather spines gleaming under chandelier light. Mr. Harrow, a wiry man with a sharp nose and sharper eyes, rose from a desk cluttered with manuscripts. "Inspector Japp, Mr. Poirot," he said, his smile thin. "I assume this is about Margaret. Dreadful business." Poirot studied Harrow, noting the slight sheen of sweat on his brow despite the cool room. "Monsieur Harrow, you were among the last to see Mademoiselle Lorne. Tell me, what was her demeanor that evening?" Harrow shrugged, adjusting his cufflinks. "Quiet as always. She kept to herself, nursing a glass of sherry. Seemed preoccupied, but that's Margaret for you. Always lost in her stories." "And yet," Poirot said, his tone mild but probing, "she has vanished, leaving behind a manuscript that speaks of a fatal deadline. You are her publisher, non? You must know of this work." Harrow's eyes flickered, but he recovered quickly. "The fatal deadline?" "Yes, she mentioned it. A new novel, very hush-hush. I haven't seen a page of it, though." Margaret's secretive like that. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Secretive, or perhaps cautious. Tell me, Monsieur Harrow, who else was present at this soiree?" Harrow rattled off names. Evelyn Crane, a rival author with a venomous pen. Lionel Gray, a playwright with a brooding air. And a handful of local literati. Poirot listened, his mind cataloging each name, each potential motive. "And you saw nothing unusual?" he pressed. "No arguments? No sudden departures?" Harrow hesitated, then shook his head. "It was a dull evening, Mr. Poirot. Writers talking shop, nothing more." Japp, growing impatient, cut in. "We'll need to speak to the others." "Where's this?" "Evelyn Crane?" Harrow gestured vaguely. "She's staying at the manor. Upstairs, I think. Gray's about somewhere, too." As they left the library, Poirot paused by a side table, where a stack of books caught his eye. One was a first edition of Christie's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, its cover pristine. Beside it lay a program for the soiree, with Margaret Lorne's name circled in red ink. Poirot pocketed the program, his expression unreadable. Upstairs, they found Evelyn Crane in a sitting room, her auburn hair pinned tightly, her eyes cold as she regarded them. "Margaret's gone missing, has she?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Hardly surprising. She's always been a bit dramatic." Poirot tilted his head, studying her. "You did not care for Mademoiselle Lorne, I think." Evelyn's laugh was sharp. "She was a hack, Mr. Poirot, churning out pale imitations of Christie. I'd have been surprised if she didn't pull a stunt like this." Japp bristled, but Poirot remained calm. "And yet, Her disappearance has caused quite a stir. Tell me, Madame Crane, what did you discuss with her that evening? Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Nothing worth mentioning. She was prattling on about some new book, as if anyone cared. I left early. Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on her clenched hands. Merci, madame. We shall speak again, I am sure. As they descended the stairs, Japp muttered, She's hiding something. Did you see her hands? Nervous as a cat. Indeed, Poirot said. But it is not only Madame Crane who hides. This manor, this village, they are full of secrets, each layered like the pages of a book. Back at the cottage, Poirot insisted on a final search. While Japp questioned the gardener, Poirot returned to the manuscript, flipping through it with renewed focus. Near the back, he found a page that had been overlooked, a map, hand-drawn, showing a path from the cottage to a cliff overlooking the sea. A tiny X marked a spot labeled the third act. Poirot's heart quickened. Mon ami, he called to Japp, who was just returning. We must visit this cliff. The truth, as Mademoiselle Lorne has promised, lies there. The cliff was a windswept promontory, the sea crashing against jagged rocks below. The path was narrow, the air heavy with salt and spray. At the spot marked X, Poirot found a small tin box buried shallowly in the earth. Inside was another note, this one in the same red ink. The truth lies in the third act. Trust no one, not even those who smile. Poirot's smile was triumphant. She is alive, Japp, and she is playing a game most dangerous. Japp stared at the note, baffled. What's she on about? Third act. Trust no one. What's it all mean? Poirot folded the note carefully, his mind alight with possibilities. It means, mon ami, that Mademoiselle Lorne has written herself into a mystery of her own making, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall be the one to solve it. The chapter closed with the sun dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cliff. Poirot stood motionless, the note in his hand, his little gray cells working furiously. The game was afoot, and he relished the challenge. Chapter 3. The manner of motives, the train's rhythmic clatter faded as Hercule Poirot stepped onto the platform at Blackwood Halt, a quaint station nestled in the rolling green of Devon. The air carried the sharp tang of damp earth and blooming gorse, a stark contrast to London's coal-dusted haze. Poirot adjusted his immaculate Homburg hat, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon where Blackwood Manor loomed, its Gothic silhouette stark against the bruised purple of the evening sky. The telegram, with its cryptic warning, 7 days until. The final page is written, burned in his mind, its literary flourish pointing to a mind both cunning and theatrical. The initials, AC, suggested Agatha Christie, but Poirot's instincts whispered of a deeper game. Margaret Lorne's disappearance, the overturned ink bottle, and the half-finished manuscript titled The Fatal Deadline were pieces of a puzzle he was determined to solve. Inspector Japp, waiting by a sleek black police motor car, raised a hand in greeting. His usually jovial face was creased with worry, his mustache twitching as he spoke. Poirot, you're a sight for sore eyes. This business with Miss Lorne's got the whole village in a tizzy. Vanished without a trace, and now we've got whispers of foul play. Poirot's mustache curled slightly, a sign of his mind already at work. Mon ami, a disappearance so neatly staged is rarely without purpose. Tell me, what do we know of this literary soirée at Blackwood Manor where Mademoiselle Lorne was last seen? Japp gestured toward the car. Hop in, and I'll fill you in. It's a rum bunch up at the manor writers, publishers, and the like, all with their own axes to grind, if you ask me. As the car wound through narrow lanes, hedgerows blurring past, Japp recounted the details. Margaret Lorne, a reclusive novelist whose mysteries rivaled Christie's in their intricate plotting, had attended a gathering at Blackwood Manor 2 nights prior. The event, hosted by the manor's owner, Sir Reginald Blackwood, was a celebration of local literary talent, though Japp suspected it was more a battleground for egos. Margaret had left early, alone, and hadn't been seen since. Her cottage, which Poirot had visited that morning, offered little beyond the overturned ink bottle and the cryptic note, hidden in her manuscript. The truth lies in the 3rd act. C'est intéressant, Poirot murmured, his gloved fingers tapping his silver-topped cane. This note, it suggests a performance, a narrative unfolding. We must look to the players at this soirée, Japp. Their motives will reveal the script. The car slowed as Blackwood Manor came into view. Its stone facade, weathered by centuries, was adorned with ivy that clung like secrets to the walls. Tall windows glowed with amber light, casting long shadows across the gravel drive. A butler, stiff as a chess piece, greeted them at the door, his eyes flickering with unease as he led them into the grand hall. The air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and old books, and a massive chandelier glittered above a sweeping staircase. Voices drifted from a nearby drawing room, a mix of laughter and sharp-edged banter. Sir Reginald Blackwood, a portly man with a florid face and a penchant for velvet waistcoats, welcomed them with forced geniality. "Inspector, Monsieur Poirot, what a surprise. I trust you're here about poor Margaret? Dreadful business, her vanishing like that." Poirot inclined his head, his gaze piercing. "Indeed, Sir Reginald. I am told Mademoiselle Lorne was a guest here 2 nights ago. Perhaps you could introduce us to those who shared her company." Of course," Sir Reginald said, mopping his brow with a silk handkerchief. "They're all here, lingering like moths around a flame. Writers, you know, always chasing inspiration or trouble." The drawing-room was a study in contrasts. Plush velvet sofas clashed with the sharp angles of modernist lamps, and a roaring fire cast flickering shadows over a eclectic gathering. Poirot's eyes swept the room, cataloguing each figure with the precision of a watchmaker. There was Evelyn Carver, a rival author whose acidic reviews of Margaret's work had sparked public feuds. Her angular face was set in a permanent sneer, her fingers clutching a glass of sherry. Beside her stood Victor Harrow, a publisher with a reputation for ruthless deals, his sleek suit and guarded eyes suggesting a man who traded in secrets as much as manuscripts. Finally, there was Lawrence Drake, a brooding playwright whose experimental works had earned both acclaim and enemies. He lounged by the fireplace, his dark gaze fixed on the flames. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice soft yet commanding, "I am Hercule Poirot, and I am here to uncover the truth behind Mademoiselle Lorne's disappearance. I ask for your candor, for the truth. It is like a fine wine. It does not improve with concealment." Evelyn Carver's laugh was sharp, like breaking glass. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, you do sound like one of Margaret's detectives. She was always so dramatic, wasn't she? Probably off sulking somewhere, plotting her next bestseller." Poirot's smile was polite but unyielding. "Perhaps, Madame Carver. Yet an overturned ink bottle and a hidden note suggest otherwise. Tell me, what was your impression of Mademoiselle Lorne that evening?" Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her fingers tightening on her gloss. She was her usual self-smug, secretive, acting as if she alone held the key to literary genius. We argued. Yes, about her latest novel. She claimed it would redefine the genre. Utter nonsense. An argument? Poirot's tone was light, but his eyes missed nothing. And what, pray, was the nature of this disagreement? She accused me of plagiarism, Evelyn snapped, her voice rising, as if I would stoop to stealing her pedestrian plots. I told her she'd regret slandering me. Japp scribbled in his notebook, his brows raised. Poirot turned to Victor Harrow, whose polished demeanor faltered under the detective's scrutiny. "Monsieur Harrow, you are a publisher. Did Mademoiselle Lorne's work interest you?" Harrow's smile was thin, practiced. "Margaret was difficult. Talented, but headstrong. She refused my offer to publish her next book, said she didn't trust my methods. We parted on civil terms, but I won't pretend I was pleased." Poirot nodded, his gaze drifting to Lawrence Drake, who had yet to speak. The playwright's fingers toyed with a silver cigarette case, his expression unreadable. "And you, Monsieur Drake? What was your connection to Mademoiselle Lorne?" Drake's voice was low, almost a growl. "We collaborated once, years ago, on a play that never saw the stage. She had a knack for plot twists, but she was paranoid, always, seeing conspiracies where there were none. That night, she was agitated, muttering about some deadline that would ruin us all." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his interest. "A deadline, you say? Did she elaborate?" Drake shrugged, lighting a cigarette with a flick of his lighter. "She was cryptic as always. Kept glancing at her watch, as if time itself was her enemy." The conversation was interrupted by a crash from the far end of the room. A young maid, her face pale, had dropped a tray of crystal glasses. She stammered an apology, but Poirot's attention was elsewhere. His eyes had caught a fleeting movement Victor Harrow, slipping a folded letter into his jacket pocket, his movements too deliberate to be innocent. "Pardons, ma," Poirot said, rising with the grace of a cat. "I must stretch my legs. This manor, it is a place of many secrets, no?" He wandered toward the fireplace, his path calculated to bring him near Harrow. The publisher stiffened, his hand hovering near his pocket. Poirot paused, ostensibly to admire a portrait of a stern-faced Blackwood ancestor, but his peripheral vision was locked on Harrow. As the publisher turned to answer a question from Sir Reginald, Poirot's nimble fingers brushed against the grate, where a corner of the letter protruded, half-burned. With a flick of his wrist, he retrieved it, concealing it in his sleeve. Evening wore on, the guests dispersing to their rooms or the library, their voices fading into the manor's labyrinthine corridors. Poirot excused himself, citing fatigue, and retired to a guest room Japp had secured. Alone, he unfolded the singed letter, its edges blackened, but the text legible. It was written in a hurried hand, the ink smudged. Midnight's toll marks the deadline. The quill strikes when the page turns. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Mon Dieu, a coded message, and one that speaks of a deadline. This quill, it is no mere literary society. It is a name, a symbol, a threat. He sat at a small desk, his mind racing. The letter's theatrical tone echoed the telegram's phrasing, suggesting a single mind behind both. The mention of the quill hinted at a secret society, perhaps, one tied to the literary world, with motives as varied as the guests he'd met tonight. Evelyn Carver's jealousy, Harrow's greed, Drake's brooding resentment, each was a thread in a tapestry Poirot was determined to unravel. He lit a small lamp, its glow illuminating the room's oak-paneled walls. The manor itself seemed to whisper secrets, its creaking floors and shadowed corners alive with possibility. Poirot's thoughts returned to Margaret's manuscript, its cryptic note about the third act. In a play, the third act was the climax, the moment of revelation. Was Margaret's disappearance the opening act, this soirée the second, and the deadline the final curtain? A soft knock interrupted his reverie. Japp entered, his face grim. "Found something odd, Poirot?" One of the gardeners saw a motor car parked near the manor's east wing the night Margaret vanished. "No one's owned up to it, and it's not Sir Reginald's." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A motor car, you say? C'est curieux. We must learn its owner, for it may lead us to our shadowy figure." Japp nodded, but his expression was skeptical. "You think this is all some grand plot, don't you? Like one of Margaret's novels? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Mon ami, life imitates art, and art, it imitates life. This manner, these people, they are players in a drama of their own making. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall direct its resolution. As Japp left, Poirot returned to the letter, his fingers tracing its charred edges. The deadline loomed 5 days hence, and the stakes were higher than a mere disappearance. The quill, the coded message, the vanished novelist all pointed to a conspiracy that threatened more than Margaret Lorne's life. Poirot leaned back, his little gray cells humming with purpose. Blackwood Manor held the key, and he would unlock its secrets before the final page was written. The night deepened, the manor settling into an uneasy silence. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows like a restless spirit. Poirot extinguished the lamp, his mind alight with possibilities. The game was afoot, and he was ready for the next act. Chapter 4. The coded cipher, the morning air in Devon, carried a crisp bite, the kind that sharpened the senses and set Hercule Poirot's little gray cells into a frenetic dance. He stood outside Blackwood Manor, the grand estate looming like a character in one of Margaret Lorne's novels, stately, secretive, and brimming with untold stories. The events of the previous night, the discovery of the cryptic letter in the fireplace, had ignited Poirot's curiosity. The phrase deadline at midnight pulsed in his mind, a literary flourish that felt both a challenge and a warning. With Inspector Japp at his side, Poirot was determined to unravel the manor's secrets and decode the letter that promised to lead him closer to the vanished novelist. The letter, singed at the edges but legible, was a puzzle wrapped in an enigma. Its text, a jumble of seemingly random words, had been written in a precise, almost mechanical hand. Moonlight casts shadows, but only the quill's ink reveals the truth. 5 to 3, K7, R12. Deadline at midnight. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he reread it, his fingers tracing the paper's texture. This, mon ami, he said to Japp, is no mere note. It is a cipher, a game of intellect designed to conceal and yet to invite discovery. And Poirot, he accepts the invitation. Japp, bundled in his overcoat against the morning chill, frowned. A cipher, you say? Looks like gibberish to me, Poirot. Why not just say what they mean? Because, Inspector. Poirot replied, his mustache twitching with a hint of amusement. The criminal mind delights in complexity. It is their vanity, their need to prove superiority. But they underestimate Hercule Poirot. He tucked the letter into his pocket and gestured toward the manor. Come, we must explore the stage where the drama unfolds. Blackwood Manors. Interior was a labyrinth of oak-paneled corridors and high-ceilinged rooms, each adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors and shelves groaning under the weight of leather-bound tomes. The literary soiree Margaret Lorne had attended here 2 nights prior had left an echo of intrigue, and Poirot's keen eyes scanned every detail: the scuff on a Persian rug, the faint smudge of ink on a doorframe, the way the curtains in the Yangtze drawing room hung slightly askew. Order and method, he murmured to himself. These are the keys to unlocking the truth. Their first stop was the library, a cavernous room that smelled of old paper and beeswax polish. It was here, Poirot suspected, that the coded letter's secrets might be rooted. The shelves stretched to the ceiling, and a spiral staircase led to a mezzanine where rare manuscripts were kept under lock and key. Japp, ever practical, began poking around the desk, while Poirot's attention was drawn to a small, ornate table in the corner. On it sat a brass inkstand, its quill oddly pristine, as if it had never been dipped in ink. Curious, Poirot said, lifting the quill and examining its tip. This quill is a prop, non? It is too perfect, too untouched for a writer's tool. He set it down and turned his gaze to the table's surface, where faint scratches formed a series of lines and dots that seemed deliberate. Inspector, Regard as Chechi. These marks, they are not random. They are a clue, perhaps a key to our cipher. Jap squinted at the table. Looks like someone got careless with a penknife. You sure you're not seeing things, Poirot? Poirot's smile was patient, but firm. The eyes of Hercule Poirot see what others overlook. These scratches are a code within a code, a map to something hidden. We must find it. Their search led them to the mezzanine, where a locked cabinet caught Poirot's eye. Jap, with a grumble about fancy locks, produced a set of skeleton keys from his pocket, a tool of his trade he was loath to admit he carried. The cabinet creaked open, revealing a collection of manuscripts, each bound in black leather, and labeled with cryptic titles: The Silent Quill, The Midnight Ink, The Shadowed Page. Poirot's fingers danced over the spines, pausing at one titled The Fatal Deadline. It was the same title as Margaret Lorne's half-finished manuscript, and Poirot's pulse quickened. Mon Dieu, he whispered, pulling the manuscript free. Its pages were dense with handwritten notes, but what caught his attention was a folded sheet tucked into the back, a diagram of Blackwood Manor, with a single room circled in red ink. The room was labeled the Quill's Sanctum. This, Poirot said, holding the diagram aloft, is where we must go. The cipher, the quill, the deadline, they all converge here. Jap scratched his head. A secret room? In a place like this? You've been reading too many of Miss Lorne's books, Poirot. Perhaps, Poirot replied, his eyes twinkling. But the truth, it often hides in the pages of fiction. The search for the Quill's Sanctum was no simple task. Blackwood Manor was a warren of hidden passages and false panels, a testament to its eccentric architect, who had apparently shared Margaret Lorne's taste for the theatrical. Poirot and Jap combed the east wing, where the diagram indicated the room lay. They tapped walls, pressed moldings, and lifted rugs, finding nothing but dust and frustration. It was only when Poirot paused to adjust his perfectly knotted tie in a hallway mirror that he noticed something peculiar. The mirror's frame was slightly misaligned, its edges not flush with the wall. "Ah!" Poirot exclaimed, pressing his fingers along the frame. A soft click echoed, and the mirror swung inward, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Jap let out a low whistle. "I'll be damned. You've got a nose for this, Poirot." "Non, Poirot corrected. "It is the little gray cells. They do the work. Now let us descend with caution. The stage is set, but the players may be watching." The staircase led to a small, windowless room lit by a single oil lamp. Its walls were lined with shelves, each holding stacks of manuscripts, ledgers, and peculiar artifacts, a silver quill, a vial of ink that shimmered oddly. In the light, a pocket watch frozen at midnight. At the room's center stood a writing desk, its surface cluttered with papers. Poirot's eyes locked onto a single sheet, written in the same precise hand as the coded letter. It read, V3K7R12. The quill's truth is written in shadow. Find the key, or the deadline claims all. Poirot's mind raced. The numbers V3, K7, R12 suggested a cipher, and the mention of the quill pointed to a specific method. "Inspector," he said, "this is a visionaire cipher, a favorite of those who wish to conceal their secrets in elegance. The numbers, they are the key, but we must find the tableau, the grid, that unlocks the message." Jap groaned. "More puzzles? Can't these villains just write a plain letter?" Poirot chuckled. "Where would be the fun in that, mon ami? No, we must play their game to win." He sat at the desk, pulling a blank sheet of paper and a pencil from his pocket. The visionaire cipher required a keyword, and the numbers V3, K7, and R12 hinted at its construction. Poirot hypothesized that the letters VKR referred to positions in a sequence. perhaps the manuscript titles or the artifacts in the room. He examined the silver quill, noting 3 notches on its shaft. The vial of ink had 7 faint scratches on its gloss. The pocket watch's face bore 12 tiny marks around its edge. The quill, the ink, the time, Poirot murmured. These are our key. Using the first letters of the artifact's Q for quill, I for ink, T for time, he constructed a keyword, kit. He then applied the Visionaire cipher to the cryptic phrase, moonlight casts shadows, but only the quill's ink reveals the truth. With meticulous precision, he aligned the keyword against the text, shifting each letter according to the cipher's grid. The result was a new message, meet at the lighthouse. The quill gathers at dusk. The final manuscript awaits. Poirot leaned back, his eyes gleaming. The lighthouse, Inspector. That is where the plot thickens. And this quill, it is no mere literary society. It is a cabal, a group with secrets they will kill to protect. Jap's face darkened. A lighthouse? That's miles from here, out on the cliffs. Dangerous place, especially at dusk. You sure about this, Poirot? As sure as my mustache is impeccable, Poirot replied. But we must be cautious. The deadline at midnight? It is not merely a time. It is a threat, a promise of action. We have 6 days until the gala, and I suspect this final manuscript holds the key to Margaret Lorne's fate. The room yielded more clues. Among the manuscripts, Poirot found a ledger listing names, dates, and sums of money payments to obscure publishers, bookshops, and printers. One entry caught his eye, a payment to the quill for a manuscript titled The Fatal Deadline, dated the day before Margaret's disappearance. Another document, tucked beneath a pile of papers, described a plot to silence the voice that knows too much. The handwriting matched the coded letter, and Poirot's heart quickened. Margaret Lorne, he said softly, she discovered. Something dangerous. Perhaps she wrote too close to the truth. Jap, rifling through a drawer, pulled out a small brass key etched with a quill symbol. What's this, then? Another of your clues? Poirot took the key, turning it over in his gloved hand. This, Inspector, is the key to a lock we have yet to find. Perhaps it opens a door, a box, or even a secret within the quill itself. We shall keep it close. As they prepared to leave the secret study, Poirot's eyes fell on a small painting. On the wall, a lighthouse under a stormy sky, its beam cutting through the darkness. The frame bore a tiny inscription. The truth lies in the light, but the shadow writes the story. Poirot's lips curved into a smile. A literary mind is at work here, mon ami. They weave their crimes like a novel, with clues and red herrings. But Poirot, he reads between the lines. The journey to the lighthouse would be perilous, especially under the cover of dusk. Poirot knew he would need a disguise to infiltrate the quill's gathering, a scholar's tweed suit, perhaps, or the garb of a wandering poet. The thought amused him, but his focus remained sharp. The quill was no ordinary literary society. It was a network of ambition and deceit, and Margaret Lorne's disappearance was merely the opening act. As they ascended the staircase back to the manor's main hall, Poirot paused, his hand on the mirror's frame. Inspector, he said, we must prepare for the unexpected. The quill knows we are close, and they will not hesitate to act. The lighthouse is our next stage, but we must tread lightly, like actors in a play we do not yet fully understand. Jap nodded, though his expression was grim. I don't like it, Poirot. Secret rooms, coded letters, masked societies. It's all a bit too clever for my taste, but I trust you to sort it out. Poirot's eyes twinkled. And sort it out. I shall, mon ami. The little gray cells, they do not rest until the truth is revealed. They stepped out into the manor's hall, the weight of the cipher's message heavy in Poirot's mind. The lighthouse awaited, a beacon of answers in a sea of mystery. But as they left Blackwood Manor, a shadow moved in the garden, a figure, cloaked in black, watching from the rose bushes. Poirot did not see it, but his instincts prickled. The game was far from over, and the deadline was drawing nearer dot in the village. Poirot and Japp stopped at a small inn to plan their next move. Over a pot of tea, Poirot sketched out a strategy. "We must attend this gathering at the lighthouse. Inspector, but we cannot go as ourselves. The quill is cunning, and they will be watching for interlopers. I shall become Monsieur Dupont, a French scholar of obscure manuscripts, invited to the gathering by a forged letter. You, mon ami, will be my assistant, a man of few words but keen eyes." Japp snorted. "Me? An assistant? I'm a Scotland Yard Inspector Poirot." "And a fine one," Poirot said smoothly. "But for now, you must play the part. The quill will not suspect a humble assistant, and your eyes will see what mine may miss." Reluctantly, Japp agreed. They spent the afternoon procuring disguises, a tweed suit and spectacles for Poirot, a plain cap and coat for Japp. Poirot also crafted a forged invitation, mimicking the precise handwriting of the coded letter. "Attention to detail," he said, dipping his pen in ink, "is the hallmark of success." As dusk approached, they set out for the cliffs, the lighthouse's silhouette stark against the fading light. The wind howled, carrying the tang of salt and the promise of a storm. Poirot's mind churned with possibilities. Was Margaret Lorne a victim or a conspirator? What was the final manuscript, and why did it demand a deadline at midnight? And who, among the quill's masked members, held the key to the truth? The lighthouse loomed closer, its beam sweeping across the cliffs like a spotlight searching for a star. Poirot adjusted his spectacles and clutched the forged invitation, his heart steady but his senses alive. "The stage is set," he murmured, "and Hercule Poirot is ready to take his place." The chapter closed with the two men approaching the lighthouse's iron door, the sound of waves crashing below. Inside, voices murmured and shadows danced in the lamplight. The quill was gathering, and Poirot knew that the next act of this deadly drama was about to begin. Chapter 5. The quill's secret gathering. The wind howled across the Devon coast, a primal force that battered the cliffs and churned the sea into a froth of whitecaps. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the village, his overcoat flapping like a dark flag as he gazed toward the distant silhouette of the Black Tor lighthouse. The fog had lifted, replaced by a storm that seemed to mirror the turmoil in his mind. The ledger from Blackwood Manor's hidden study weighed heavily in his satchel, its cryptic entries about the quill and their final manuscript fueling his determination. Tonight, he would infiltrate their clandestine meeting, disguised as a visiting scholar. His mustache twitched with anticipation, but a flicker of unease stirred within his little gray cells. The quill was no ordinary foe. They were a cabal of intellect and cunning, cloaked in the trappings of literature. Inspector Japp had been left behind in the village, grumbling about the madness of venturing into a storm. "You're walking into a lion's den, Poirot," he'd warned, his face creased with worry. "If they're half as clever as you say, they'll sniff you out in a heartbeat." "Mon ami," Poirot had replied, adjusting his false spectacles, "it is precisely their cleverness that will blind them. They expect a scholar, and a scholar they shall have. Hercule Poirot is never outwitted by a mere mask." Now, as he trudged along the coastal path, the lighthouse loomed closer, its beam cutting through the tempest like a blade. The disguise was meticulous. A tweed suit, slightly rumpled to suggest academic neglect, a pair of wire-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose, and a leather-bound notebook tucked under his arm. His hair was dusted with gray powder, and a subtle stoop softened his usual impeccable posture. He had adopted the persona of Dr. Emile Fournier, a French literary historian with a penchant for obscure Victorian novels, a role he'd crafted. With care, complete with forged credentials, should anyone inquire. The path wound upward, slick with rain, and Poirot's polished shoes slipped on the stones. He steadied himself, clutching the satchel that held the ledger, and a small revolver Jap had insisted he carry. Just in case, the inspector had muttered. Poirot had no intention of using it. His weapon was his mind, but its weight was. A grim reminder of the stakes dotted the lighthouse's base. A heavy iron door stood ajar, its hinges creaking in the wind. Poirot slipped inside, the air turning damp and metallic. A spiral staircase ascended into shadow, lit only by the flickering glow of oil lamps. Voices drifted down, low and rhythmic, like a chant. He adjusted his glasses, squared his shoulders, and climbed, each step measured to mask his usual brisk gait. The chamber at the top was a circular vault, its stone walls glistening with moisture. A dozen figures stood in a semicircle, their faces hidden behind Venetian masks, gold, black, and crimson, each adorned with feathers or filigree. They wore robes of heavy velvet, embroidered with the quill and inkpot emblem Poirot recognized from the ledger. A long table dominated the room, strewn with manuscripts, candelabras, and a single massive tome bound in black leather. The air was thick with the scent of wax and old paper, and the storm's roar outside seemed to underscore the gravity of their gathering. A figure in a crimson mask, taller than the rest, raised a hand for silence. "Brothers and sisters of the quill," they intoned, their voice deep and resonant. "We stand on the precipice of our greatest work. The final manuscript is nearly complete. In 6 days, at the gala, we shall rewrite history." Poirot, lingering at the edge of the circle, bowed slightly, clutching his notebook. "Dr. Émile Fournier," he said, his accent thickened to a provincial French drawl. "I am honored to join your esteemed society, though I confess I am late to this chapter." The crimson-masked figure turned, their eyes glinting through the slits. "Fournier, your reputation precedes you. Your treatise on Brontu's Lost Drafts was provocative. But tell me, what brings a scholar to our humble gathering?" Poirot's heart quickened, but his smile was serene. "The pursuit of truth, not realming. I have heard whispers of the quill's work manuscripts that transcend mere fiction. I wish to learn, to contribute." A murmur rippled through this group, some nodding, others exchanging glances. A woman in a gold mask stepped forward, her voice sharp. "We guard our secrets closely, Dr. Fournier. What do you offer in return?" Poirot opened his notebook, revealing pages filled with fabricated notes on obscure texts. "A theory," he said, "that certain Victorian novels conceal coded histories of crime. I believe the quill shares this interest, non?" The crimson-masked leader tilted their head, intrigued. A bold claim. "Perhaps you'll share more later. For now, observe." They gestured to the table, where the black tome lay open. "This is our final manuscript. It will reshape the literary world and beyond." Poirot edged closer, his eyes scanning the pages. The text was written in a dense, elegant script, interspersed with diagrams and ciphers. One passage caught his attention. The gala, midnight, the pen strikes. The target falls, and the quill ascends. His pulse quickened. The target was unnamed, but the mention of a pen echoed the poisoned pen clue from the ledger. This was no metaphor, it was a murder plan. The meeting continued, the members discussing logistics with a chilling precision. Poirot noted their hierarchy. The crimson-masked figure, likely the leader, commanded deference, while the gold-masked woman seemed a skeptical enforcer. Others spoke of distractions at the gala fires, false alarms to ensure chaos. Poirot's mind raced, cataloging each detail while maintaining his scholarly facade. A sudden gust rattled the lighthouse, and a candelabra tipped, spilling wax across the table. In the brief chaos, Poirot slipped a folded page from the tome into his sleeve, a risky move but necessary. As he straightened, the gold-masked woman's gaze locked onto him. "Dr. Fournier," she said, her voice icy, "you seem distracted." "Pardonnez-moi," Poirot replied, adjusting his glasses. "The storm, it unsettles me. I am not accustomed to such wild English weather." Her eyes narrowed, but the crimson leader waved her off. "Let him be, Cassandra. We have greater matters to attend." The meeting resumed, but Poirot felt the weight of her suspicion. He needed to leave before his cover unraveled as the group began a ritualistic reading from the tome. Poirot excused himself, citing a sudden headache. He descended the staircase, his heart pounding, but halfway down, footsteps echoed behind him. He quickened his pace, reaching the iron door just as the gold-masked woman Cassandra appeared at the top of the stairs. "Dr. Fournier," she called, her voice sharp. "You forgot your notebook." Poirot turned, his smile tight. "How careless of me." "I shall return for it tomorrow, mademoiselle. The storm calls me to shelter." Her mask hid her expression, but her posture was predatory. "See that you do," she said, tossing the notebook down. It landed at his feet, and he scooped it up, bowing before slipping into the night. A storm enveloped him, rain lashing his face as he hurried along the cliff path. The stolen page burned in his sleeve, its secrets a ticking clock. He reached a fisherman's shack, a prearranged safe haven, and barred the door. Under the dim light of a lantern, he unfolded the page. It detailed a plan to poison a high-profile figure at the gala, using a fountain pen rigged with a concealed needle. The target was coded as the Muse, but Poirot's instincts screamed Agatha Christie's name. A sudden thud at the door jolted him. He doused the lantern, gripping the revolver. Shadows moved outside, and a low voice hissed, "Fournier, we know you're in there." It was Cassandra, her tone venomous. The door rattled, but the bolt held. Poirot's mind raced. The shack had a trapdoor to a smuggler's tunnel, a detail Jap had mentioned. He pried it open, wincing at the creak, and descended into the damp, earthen passage. The tunnel wound toward the village, its walls slick with seawater. Behind him, the door splintered, and footsteps echoed. Cassandra and another figure, likely a Quill enforcer, were in pursuit. The tunnel opened onto a rocky beach, the storm's fury unabated. Poirot stumbled onto the sand, his disguise sodden and useless. He discarded the glasses and tore off the gray powder, becoming himself again. Lightning illuminated the cliffs, revealing Cassandra's silhouette at the tunnel's mouth. She shouted something lost in the wind and raised a pistol. Poirot dove behind a boulder, the shot ringing out, a bullet grazing the rock. He scrambled toward the village, using the storm's chaos as cover. His heart pounded, but his resolve hardened. The Quill was desperate, which meant he was close to the truth. He reached the village inn, soaked and breathless, where Jap waited. "Blimey, Poirot, you look like you've been through hell," Jap exclaimed, pouring him a brandy. "None, Inspector," Poirot said, catching his breath. "Hell is what the Quill plans for the gala. We have 6 days to identify their target and stop them. The Muse must be protected." As the storm raged outside, Poirot unfolded the stolen page, his little gray cells alight. The Quill's plot was unraveling, but the danger was far from over. The chapter closed with him staring into the fire, his mind a whirl of ciphers, masks, and the ticking clock of the fatal deadline. Chapter 6. The gala's guest list. The Devon morning broke with a restless energy, the sky bruised with clouds that hung low over the village of Blackwood. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his mustache gleaming with a fresh application of wax, stood at the edge of the village square. His sharp eyes scanned the cobblestone streets, where locals bustled with the quiet urgency of a town preparing for a grand event. The literary gala, set to unfold in 6 days at Blackwood Manor, was the talk of the village, a glittering affair that promised to draw luminaries from London and beyond. Poirot's mind, however, was not on the gala's splendor, but on its shadows. The cryptic telegram signed A.C., the vanished novelist Margaret Lorne, and the sinister whispers of the quill all converged on this event. He suspected the gala was no mere celebration, but the stage for a deadly act. Poirot's first task was to secure the guest list, a document that might reveal the target of the quill's plot. He adjusted his Homburg hat and made his way to the Blackwood Inn, where the gala's organizer, a wiry man named Mr. Clarence Vane, was known to take his morning tea. The inn was a charming relic, its timber-bird walls adorned with faded paintings of Devon's coastline. Inside, the air smelled of scones and wood smoke, and Poirot found Vane seated at a corner table, poring over a ledger with a harried expression. "Bonjour, Monsieur Vane," Poirot greeted, his voice smooth as polished oak. "I am Hercule Poirot, a detective of some repute, and I have an interest in your forthcoming gala." Vane, a man with thinning hair and spectacles perched precariously on his nose, looked up with a mix of surprise and suspicion. "Poirot? The detective? I've heard of you, sir, but what brings you to Blackwood? The gala is a literary event, not a crime scene." Poirot smiled, his eyes glinting with the patience of a predator. "Perhaps it is not yet a crime scene, monsieur, but I have reason to believe it may become one. I require the guest list for your event. It is, shall we say, a matter of some urgency." Vane hesitated, his fingers tightening around his teacup. "The guest list is confidential, Mr. Poirot. We've got MPs, authors, even Dame Agatha Christie herself attending. I can't just hand it over." Poirot leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Monsieur, I am not here to disrupt your plans, but to ensure they proceed without tragedy. A certain society, known as the Quill, may have designs on your gala. The list, if you please." The mention of the quill made Vane's face pale, his spectacles slipping further down his nose. "The quill? I've heard rumors literary types with too much money and too few scruples. But surely they're just a club, not criminals?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "A club, monsieur, does not send cryptic telegrams or orchestrate disappearances. The list, s'il vous plaît." Reluctantly, Vane produced a folded sheet from his ledger, scribbled with names in meticulous script. Poirot's eyes scanned the page, committing each name to memory. Sir Edmund Blake, a prominent MP known for his fiery speeches on censorship. Miss Evelyn Carver, a reclusive heiress who funded literary societies. Mr. Lionel Harrow, the publisher. From Blackwood Manor, Mr. Julian Drake, the brooding playwright. Miss Clara Wentworth, the jealous rival author. And most notably, Dame Agatha Christie herself. The list was a constellation of motives, each name a potential target or conspirator. "Merci, Monsieur Vane," Poirot said, folding the list into his pocket. "You have been most helpful. One more question. Has anyone inquired about this list, or the gala's arrangements in a manner unusual?" Vane frowned, scratching his chin. "Well, there was that bookseller, Mr. Finch, from the village shop. Came by yesterday, nervous as a cat, asking who'd be sitting near Dame Agatha. Said he was curating a gift for her. Seemed odd, but I didn't think much of it." Poirot's little gray cells sparked. "Mr. Finch, you say? Most interesting. I shall pay him a visit. Au revoir, monsieur." The village bookshop, Finch's Folios, was a cramped haven of leather-bound tomes and dust motes, dancing in slanted light. Mr. Finch, a stooped man with ink-stained fingers and a perpetual squint, was rearranging a display of Christie novels when Poirot entered. The bell above the door jingled, and Finch's head snapped up, his eyes darting like a cornered animal's. "Good day, Monsieur Finch," Poirot said, his tone disarmingly polite. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I am curious about your interest in the gala's seating arrangements." Finch's hands trembled, knocking a copy of Murder on the Orient Express to the floor. "But Poirot? I don't know what you mean. I'm just a bookseller, sir." Poirot stepped closer, his gaze piercing. "Yet you inquired about Dame Agatha Christie's place at the gala. Why, monsieur? A gift, perhaps, or something more sinister?" Finch's squint deepened, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean any harm. A lady came in last week, bought a rare Christie draft The Mousetrap, an early version. She asked me to find out where Dame Agatha would be seated. Said it was for a surprise tribute. Paid me well, too." Poirot's mind raced. A rare Christie draft? The Quill's obsession with manuscripts suggested this was no mere tribute. This lady, describe her. Tall, sharp-eyed, wore a green scarf. Didn't give her name, but she had a way about her, like she was used to being obeyed. Poirot nodded, his suspicions narrowing. The description matched Clara Wentworth, the rival author from Blackwood Manor, whose envy of Christie's success was no secret. "And this draft, monsieur, where is it now?" Finch gestured to a locked glass case behind the counter. "I kept a copy of the pages she bought." "Didn't feel right letting it go without a record." Poirot's heart quickened. "Show me." Finch unlocked the case with trembling hands, producing a sheaf of yellowed pages. The draft was unmistakably Christie's, her precise handwriting marred by later annotations in red ink. Poirot's eyes scanned the notes, which read like a coded commentary. The trap is set in the third act. The victim trusts the pen. The ink is the key. His breath caught. The annotations hinted at a real murder, disguised as fiction, with a fountain pen as the weapon, a chilling echo of the deadline at midnight from the coded letter. "Merci, Monsieur Finch," Poirot said, slipping the pages into his coat. "You have done well to keep this. Speak of it to no one." As Poirot left the shop, the village clock struck noon, its chimes a reminder of the ticking deadline. 6 days remained until the gala, and the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The Quill's plot centered on Agatha Christie, her presence at the gala no coincidence. The annotated draft, the cryptic telegram, and the mention of a pen suggested a murder planned with theatrical precision. But why Christie? Was it her fame, her wealth, or something buried in her unpublished works? Poirot's next stop was the village telegraph office, a squat building where a young clerk named Molly sorted messages with mechanical efficiency. He needed to trace the origins of the A.C. telegram, suspecting it was Christie herself, but he could not rule out a clever impostor. Molly, her auburn hair tied back with a ribbon, greeted him with a curious smile. "Mr. Poirot, isn't it? Everyone's talking about you poking around. What's a famous detective doing in Blackwood?" Poirot bowed slightly. "Mademoiselle, I am but a humble seeker of truth. I require information about a telegram sent to my London address, signed A.C. Can you assist?" Molly's smile faded. "Telegrams are private, sir, but, well, seeing as it's you, I'll check the records." She rifled through a stack of carbons, her brow furrowing. "Here it is, sent from London, not Blackwood. No sender's name, just the initials. Paid in cash. That's all I've got." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "London, you say? Most intriguing. And no other telegrams signed A.C. in recent days?" Molly shook her head. "None, but there was something odd. A man came in the day before that telegram was sent, asking if we'd received anything from London for a foreign gentleman. Described you to a T mustache and all." Poirot's mustache twitched. Did he know? And this man? Dark coat, hat pulled low, didn't give a name. Looked like he didn't want to be remembered. Poirot thanked Molly and stepped into the street, his mind ablaze. The quill was watching him, anticipating his moves. The man at the telegraph. Office could be the publisher, Harrow, or the playwright, Drake, both of whom had motives tied to Blackwood Manor. But the draft's annotations gnawed at him. The ink is the key. Was it literal, a poisoned pen? Or metaphorical, a secret hidden? In Christie's writing? As evening fell, Poirot returned to the inn, where Inspector Japp awaited him in the lounge, nursing a pint of ale. Japp's ruddy face broke into a grin. "Poirot, you look like a cat with a canary. What have you dug up?" Poirot recounted his findings, the guest list, Finch's revelation about the draft, and the mysterious man at the telegraph office. Japp whistled low. "Sounds like a proper nest of vipers. This quill lot, they're not just bookworms, are they?" "Non, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice grave. "They are orchestrating a murder, and I believe Dame Agatha is their target. The draft I found it speaks of a pen, a trap, and ink. I suspect a literal weapon, disguised as an innocent tool of the writer's trade." Japp leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "A poisoned pen? That's bold, even for a secret society. What's your next move?" "I must see the gala's arrangements." "Myself," Poirot replied. "The seating, the stage, the props, every detail matters. And I must speak with Dame Agatha. If she is the target, she may know more than she has revealed." Japp nodded. "I'll get you into the Manor tomorrow. They're setting up the gala space now. But watch your back, Poirot. If the quills on to you, they won't play nice." That night, Poirot sat by his window, the annotated draft spread before him. The red ink annotations haunted him, their cryptic phrases weaving a narrative of betrayal. He traced a finger over the words. The victim trusts the pen. Christie's draft was no mere story. It was a blueprint, a warning, or perhaps a lure. His little gray cells worked furiously, piecing together the motives. Clara Wentworth's envy could drive her to murder, but the publisher, Harrow, had the means to orchestrate a larger scheme. The playwright, Drake, with his flair for drama, might crave the spotlight of a public assassination, and the heiress, Evelyn Carver, with her wealth tied to literary societies, could be funding the quill's operations. A soft knock at the door startled him. It was Vane, his face ashen. "Mr. Poirot, I shouldn't be here, but I overheard something at the Manor. Two men whispering about a delivery for the gala. They mentioned a pen, a gift for the guest of honor." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A pen, you say? Did you see these men?" Vane shook his head. "Too dark. But one had a limp, and the other," he sounded educated, like a toff. Poirot's mind flashed to Harrow, whose polished accent matched Vane's description, and Drake, whose stage. Injuries might cause a limp. "Merci, Monsieur Vane. You have done well. Return to your duties and say nothing of this." As Vane slipped away, Poirot leaned back, the draft's words echoing in his mind. The gala was 5 days away, and the noose was tightening. He would protect Agatha Christie, unmask the quill, and foil their plot. But first, he needed to see the gala's stage, where the trap would be set. His mustache curled slightly, a sign of his resolve. The game, as Christie might write, was afoot the next morning. Poirot and Japp arrived at Blackwood Manor, where workers were erecting a grand marquee on the lawn. The gala's stage, a raised platform framed by velvet curtains, stood at the center, designed for speeches and readings. Poirot's eyes scanned the area, noting the tables, the chandeliers, and a small podium where a guest book and pen awaited the attendees. The pen, an elegant silver fountain pen, caught his attention. He approached, lifting it with a gloved hand. Its weight felt off, heavier than it should be. "Jap," Poirot murmured, "this pen is no ordinary instrument. Observe the barrel. It is wider than necessary, as if concealing something." Jap squinted. "You think it's the weapon?" "Blimey, Poirot, they're not subtle, are they?" "On the contrary, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low. "They are subtle in their audacity. Pen, given to Dame Agatha to sign the guest book, would be trusted. The ink, perhaps, is not ink at all." Jap's face hardened. "I'll have it tested. If it's poisoned, we'll have them dead to rights." "None," Poirot cautioned. "We must not alert the quill. Replace the pen with an identical one, but keep this for analysis. I wish to see how far they will go." As Jap arranged for the switch, Poirot wandered the marquee, his mind mapping the layout. A guest of honor's table was near the stage, isolated enough for a subtle attack. The lighting, dim and dramatic, would mask any sleight of hand. He pictured Christie, poised with the pen, unaware of its danger. The image spurred him onward. By afternoon, Poirot returned to the village, his thoughts turning to Clara Wentworth, her purchase of the draft, and her inquiry about Christie's seating suggested she was more than a jealous rival. He found her at the village hall, rehearsing a reading for the gala. Clara, a tall woman with sharp features and a green scarf draped over shoulders, paused mid-sentence as Poirot approached. "Miss Wentworth," Poirot began, his tone courteous but firm, "I am Hercule Poirot, and I have questions about your recent acquisition, a draft of the mousetrap." Clara's eyes flickered, but her voice remained steady. "I'm a collector, Mr. Poirot. Christie's drafts are valuable." "What of it?" Poirot smiled thinly. "A collector, perhaps, but one who asks pointed questions about Dame Agatha's place at the gala. And this draft contains annotations that speak of murder. Tell me, mademoiselle, what do you know of the quill?" Clara's composure cracked, her fingers tightening on her script. "The quill? They're a myth, a story writers tell to scare each other. I bought the draft for my collection, nothing more." Poirot stepped closer, his voice soft but unyielding. "And yet you paid Mr. Finch to learn Dame Agatha's seating. A curious detail for a mere collector. Speak, mademoiselle, or I shall. Assume you are complicit in a plot most foul." Clara's lips parted, but no words came. She turned away, her scarf slipping to reveal a small tattoo on her wrist, a quill pen, its feather sharp as a blade. Poirot's heart quickened. "The mark of the quill," he said. "You are one of them." Clara spun back, her eyes blazing. "You don't understand, Poirot. They're everywhere, publishers, writers, even politicians. They control the literary world. And I was drawn in, but I never meant for anyone to die." "Then help." Poirot urged. "Who is their leader? What is their plan?" Clara hesitated, then whispered, "The playwright, Julian Drake. He's the one who wants Christie dead. He thinks her fame overshadows us all. The pen, it's his idea. Poisoned. Ink, to be used at the gala." Poirot's mind raced. Drake, with his brooding intensity and flair for drama, fit the role of mastermind. But Clara's confession felt too easy, a distraction perhaps. "Merci, mademoiselle," he said. "Remain here. Inspector Japp will have questions." As Poirot left the hall, the village was settling into dusk, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Clara's words confirmed his suspicions, but doubts lingered. Was she a pawn or a player? The pen, the draft, the telegram all pointed to Christie, but the quill's true motive remained elusive. Was it revenge, greed, or something deeper, a secret Christie had uncovered in her writing? Poirot returned to the inn, where Japp awaited with news. "The pen's being tested, Poirot. Early results suggest cyanide in the ink." "Nasty stuff." We've replaced it with a dummy, like you said. Excellent, mon ami, Poirot said. But we must be vigilant. The quill knows I am close. Tomorrow, we visit the manor again. I wish to observe Mr. Drake and Mr. Harrow. One of them, I believe, holds the final piece of this puzzle. As night fell, Poirot sat by the fire, the annotated draft open before him. The words, "The ink is the key," burned in his mind. The gala was 5 days away, and the trap was set. But Poirot, with his little gray cells and unyielding resolve, would ensure it ensnared the guilty, not the innocent. The game was far from over, and Hercule Poirot was ready for its next act. Chapter 7. The train to London. The platform at Exeter St. David's station buzzed with the restless energy of early morning travelers, their voices mingling with the hiss of steam and the clatter of luggage carts. Hercule Poirot stood near the edge of the platform, his polished shoes gleaming under the weak autumn sun. His gloved hands clasped a small leather valise, and his mustache, meticulously waxed, quivered slightly as he surveyed the scene. The train to London, a sleek locomotive with gleaming brass fittings, awaited him, its whistle piercing the crisp air. 5 days remained until the gala at Blackwood Manor, and Poirot's mind churned with the urgency of the cryptic deadline. 7 days until the final page is written. The words, penned in the mysterious telegram signed A.C., echoed in his little gray cells, each syllable a puzzle piece in a game he was determined to master. Inspector Japp, ever the pragmatic companion, had bid him farewell at the village. In an hour earlier, promising to follow up on leads at Blackwood Manor. "Mind yourself, Poirot," Japp had said, his voice gruff but laced with concern. "This quill business smells like trouble, and I don't fancy fishing you out of the Thames." Poirot had merely smiled, adjusting his Homburg hat. "Mon ami, the Thames is far too cold for Hercule Poirot. I shall keep my feet firmly on dry land." Now, as he boarded the first-class carriage, Poirot's sharp eyes scanned his fellow passengers. A young woman in a cloche hat clutched a novel, her fingers nervously turning pages she didn't read. A portly businessman rustled his newspaper, muttering about stock prices. A gaunt man in a tweed suit sat alone, his gaze fixed on the platform. As if expecting a ghost, Poirot's intuition prickled. The quill, that shadowy literary society, had tendrils everywhere, and he suspected their agents were closer than he'd like. He settled into a plush seat by the window, the carriages. Mahogany paneling and velvet cushions, a small comfort against the weight of the case. The gala's guest list, tucked into his valise, named Agatha Christie herself as a potential target, a revelation that had set his mind ablaze. The rare draft of her unpublished work, annotated with hints of a real murder, suggested a motive, far darker than literary rivalry. And then there was the clue from the lighthouse meeting, a murder weapon hidden in plain sight. Poirot's fingers tapped a rhythm on his knee, his thoughts weaving through the labyrinth of clues. The train lurched forward, and the Devon countryside blurred past rolling hills dotted with sheep, hedgerows heavy with dew, and the occasional spire of a village church. Poirot opened his valise and withdrew a small notebook, jotting down his observations. The quill, a literary society with criminal ambitions. A weapon disguised as something ordinary. A deadline tied to the gala. He underlined Agatha Christie twice, his pen pressing hard enough to dent the paper. She was the key, he was certain. But why? And how did Margaret Lorne, the vanished novelist, fit into this plot? A shadow fell across his notebook. "Pardon. Sir, your ticket?" The conductor, a wiry man with a bristling mustache, stood over him, his clipboard poised. Poirot handed over his ticket with a courteous nod, noting the man's calloused hands and a faint ink stain on his cuff. Curio, he thought. Conductors rarely handled ink. He filed the detail away, his mind ever alert to anomalies. As the conductor moved on, a new figure approached, a man in his 30s, lean and sharp-featured, with eyes that darted like a fox's. He wore a tailored suit, slightly rumpled, and carried a leather satchel embossed with the initials E.R. He paused by Poirot's seat, offering a smile that was all charm and no warmth. "Mind if I join you, monsieur? The other seats are dreadfully crowded." Poirot gestured to the empty seat opposite, his expression neutral, but his senses on high alert. "But of course, monsieur. Hercule Poirot is always pleased to share a journey with pleasant company." The man's smile flickered, as if he recognized the name, but chose not to acknowledge it. "Edmund Royce, journalist," he said, settling into the seat with a casual grace. "I write for the Clarion, on my way to London for a big story. And you, monsieur? You've the look of a man with a purpose." Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his face remained impassive. "A purpose, oui? I am a detective, monsieur, and my purpose is always the pursuit of truth. Tell me, what is this big story that takes you to London?" Royce leaned back, his fingers drumming on his satchel. "Oh, the usual. A literary gala at Blackwood Manor. Everyone who's anyone in publishing will be there. Rumor has it Agatha Christie herself is attending. Quite a scoop, don't you think?" The mention of Christie sent a jolt through Poirot, though he betrayed nothing. Indeed, a most fascinating event. "And what is it about this gala that interests the Clarion? Surely not merely the guest list?" Royce's eyes narrowed, a fleeting crack in his polished facade. "You're a sharp one, aren't you? Let's just say there's talk of a scandal, a missing writer, whispers of a secret society. The sort of thing that sells papers." Poirot's mustache twitched. The quill. Royce knew more than he let on, and Poirot intended to find out how much. "A secret society, you say? How very theatrical. And this missing writer, Margaret Lorne, perhaps?" Royce's fingers stilled on his satchel, his smile tightening. "You're well informed, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, Margaret Lorne. Vanished. Without a trace. Some say she's run off with a lover, others that she's dead. What's your take?" Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. "My take, Monsieur Royce, is that nothing is as it seems. A disappearance, a cryptic telegram, a gala with a hidden purpose. These are the threads of a tapestry, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall unravel it." Royce chuckled, but there was a nervous edge to it. "You sound like one of Lorne's novels. All clues and conspiracies. Care for a drink? I've a flask of something to warm the journey." He reached into his satchel and produced a silver flask, unscrewing the cap with a flourish. Poirot's eyes followed the movement, noting the slight tremor in Royce's hand. "Non merci," he said, his tone polite but firm. "I prefer to keep my mind clear, but please do not let me stop you." Royce shrugged and poured a small measure of amber liquid into a tin cup, offering it to Poirot. "Sure you won't? Reconsider? It's fine whiskey, straight from Scotland." Poirot's gaze locked onto the cup, his instincts screaming. The faint scent of almonds, almost imperceptible, wafted from the liquid. Cyanide, he thought, his heart quickening. The quill's reach was long, and Royce was no mere journalist. With a deft movement, Poirot reached for his own cup of tea, brought from the dining car earlier, and pretended to fumble. In the split second Royce glanced away, Poirot switched the cups, placing his tea in Royce's hand and taking the poisoned whiskey. "Merci, monsieur," Poirot said, raising the tin cup as if to toast. "To the truth, oui?" Royce hesitated, his eyes flickering to the cup now in his hand. "To the truth," he echoed, his voice strained. He took a sip, then coughed, his face paling as he realized his mistake. You switched them." Poirot's expression was one of serene reproach. "Sir Royce, It is unwise to play such games with Hercule Poirot. The whiskey, it was meant for me, n'est-ce pas? A crude attempt, but effective, had I been less vigilant. Now tell me, who sent you? The quill, I presume? Royce slumped in his seat, sweat beading on his brow. The dose, it seemed, was not immediately lethal, but enough to weaken him. You don't understand, he gasped. They're everywhere. The quill. They know you're close. The gala. It's a trap. Poirot leaned closer, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. A trap for whom? Madame Christie? Or perhaps for me? Speak, monsieur, or the next sip will be your last. Royce's eyes darted wildly, his hands clutching the armrests. Not Christie, not just her. The weapon. It's hidden in plain sight, at the gala. You'll never see it coming. Poirot's mind raced. The phrase again hidden in plain sight. A pen, perhaps? A book? Something innocuous, yet deadly. He pressed further. Who hired you, Royce? Names, details. The truth, or I shall ensure you face justice before the train reaches London. Royce's breathing grew labored, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. Harrow, Victor Harrow, the publisher. He's one of them. The quill. They're using the gala to eliminate someone who knows too much. I don't know who, I swear. I was just to slow you down. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Victor Harrow, the secretive publisher from Blackwood Manor, whose cryptic letter had pointed to a deadline at midnight. The pieces were aligning, but the picture remained incomplete. And Margaret Lorne? What do you know of her? Royce shook his head, his voice a whisper. She's alive, hiding. She found something in Christie's work. I don't know what. Please, Poirot, get me a doctor. Poirot stood, his expression unyielding. You shall have a doctor, monsieur, but first you will come with. He signaled to a passing porter, a burly man with a no-nonsense air. This gentleman is unwell. Please ensure he is detained in the baggage car until we reach London. I shall inform the authorities. The porter nodded, hauling Royce to his feet as the journalist protested weakly. Poirot watched them go, his mind already turning to the next move. Harrow was a key figure, but the mention of Christie's work gnawed at him. Margaret Lorne had been researching Christie's unpublished drafts, and now Royce confirmed she'd uncovered something dangerous. Was it a code? A confession? Or something more sinister? As the train thundered toward London, Poirot returned to his notebook, sketching a diagram of the clues. The quill, Harrow, the gala, a weapon hidden in plain sight. Margaret Lorne, alive but in hiding. He circled Agatha Christie, adding a question mark. Her role in this mystery was unclear victim, mastermind, or both. The telegram, signed A.C., suggested she knew more than she'd revealed. Poirot resolved to confront her in London, but first he needed to ensure her safety. The countryside gave way to the outskirts of the city, smokestacks and terraced houses replacing fields and hedgerows. Poirot's thoughts drifted to the gala, now 5 days away. The guest list included a prominent MP, a reclusive heiress, and Christie herself, but Royce's confession hinted at a broader target. Someone who knows too much. The phrase echoed in his mind, a warning and a challenge dot at Paddington Station. Poirot disembarked, his valise in hand and his resolve unshaken. The platform was a chaos of travelers, porters, and newsboys shouting headlines. He hailed a taxi, instructing the driver to take him to Scotland Yard. Japp needed to know about Royce, and the journalist's attention would yield more answers. As the taxi wove through London's bustling streets, Poirot's eyes caught a headline on a discarded newspaper. Literary gala to host Agatha Christie amid scandal rumors. He leaned back, his fingers stroking his mustache. The quill was bold, orchestrating a murder in such a public setting. But boldness was a weakness, for it left traces clues that Hercule Poirot would follow to their source. The taxi pulled up to Scotland Yard, and Poirot stepped out, his mind a whirlwind of calculations. The game was afoot, and he would not rest until the final page was written and the truth revealed. The chapter closed with Poirot entering the yard, Royce's confession burning in his mind, and a single certainty: the gala would be the stage for a showdown, and he, Hercule Poirot, would be ready. Chapter 8. Agatha's Warning, the London. Air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked cobblestones as Hercule Poirot stepped off the train at Paddington Station, his polished shoes clicking against the platform. The journey from Devon had been fraught with tension, the memory of the journalist's sly attempt to drug his tea still fresh in his mind. Poirot's little gray cells churned, piecing together the fragments of this intricate puzzle. The Quill, a shadowy literary society, was no mere club of eccentric writers. It was a criminal network, and Agatha Christie, the queen of mystery herself, held the key to unraveling it. The telegram signed A.C. had not been a plea for help, but a summons, and Poirot was determined to answer it. He adjusted his Homburg hat, his mustache twitching as he scanned the bustling station. The platform was a kaleidoscope of hurried travelers, men in bowlers clutching briefcases, women in fur-trimmed coats balancing hat boxes, and porters weaving through the crowd with trolleys piled high. Poirot's sharp eyes caught a flicker of movement. A man in a drab overcoat lingered near a newsstand, his gaze too fixed, too deliberate. Poirot's instincts flared. Another watcher from the Quill, perhaps. He tucked his silver-headed cane under his arm and moved toward the exit, keeping the man in his peripheral vision. The game, as always, was afoot. Outside, the city roared with life. Horse-drawn cabs clattered alongside motor cars, their horns blaring in a discordant symphony. Poirot hailed a taxi, his voice crisp as he gave the driver Agatha Christie's address. "In Kensington. And make haste, mon ami," he added, settling into the leather seat. The driver, a wiry man with a gap-toothed grin, nodded and spurred the vehicle into the flow of traffic. As the taxi wound through London's labyrinthine streets, Poirot's mind returned to the gala's guest list. The presence of Agatha Christie herself, alongside a prominent MP and a reclusive heiress, suggested a target of immense significance. The journalist's confession that the murder weapon was hidden in plain sight gnawed at him. A fountain, pen perhaps, a letter opener, or something more insidious, cloaked in the elegance of a literary gala. The taxi lurched to a stop outside a handsome Georgian townhouse, its ivy-clad facade glowing faintly under the gaslights. Poirot paid the driver, adding a generous tip, and ascended the steps. He rapped the brass knocker, its echo sharp in the evening quiet. The door opened to reveal a maid, her starched apron pristine, her expression wary. "Monsieur Poirot to see Madame Christie," he announced, presenting his card with a flourish. The maid hesitated, then ushered him into a warmly lit parlor. Room was a testament to Christie's success. Mahogany bookshelves groaned under the weight of leather-bound volumes. A Persian rug softened the hardwood floor, and a crystal chandelier cast prisms of light across the walls. A fire crackled in the hearth, its glow illuminating a woman seated in a wing-back chair. Agatha Christie was younger than Poirot had expected, her auburn hair neatly pinned, her eyes sharp with intelligence. She rose, her tweed skirt rustling, and extended a hand. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice calm but laced with urgency. "I've been expecting you." Poirot bowed, kissing her hand with practiced gallantry. "Madame Christie, your telegram was most intriguing. A puzzle worthy of your novels, n'est-ce pas?" She smiled, but it was a smile tinged with strain. "Sit, please. We have much to discuss and little time." She gestured to a velvet settee, and Poirot settled onto it, his posture impeccable. The maid reappeared with a silver tray, bearing a teapot, porcelain cups, and a plate of shortbread. Poirot's eyes flicked to the tea, his encounter on the train making him cautious. Christie noticed and chuckled softly. "I assure you, monsieur, my tea is quite safe, though I commend your vigilance." He inclined his head, accepting a cup, but setting it untouched on the side table. "Madame, let us dispense with pleasantries. Your telegram spoke of a deadly plot, a deadline in 7 days. I have uncovered much in Devon a vanished novelist, a secret society called the Quill, a coded letter pointing to a deadline at midnight, and now a journalist's confession that the weapon is hidden in plain sight. I suspect you are the target, but I require the truth. Why did you summon me?" Christie leaned back, her fingers tracing the armrest. "You are as perceptive as your reputation suggests. Yes, I sent the telegram. I've been receiving threats from the Quill for months. They believe I've uncovered their activities through my writing. They're not wrong." She paused, her gaze drifting to the fire. "I've always woven truth into my fiction, Monsieur Poirot. A detail here, a motive there. But this time, I stumbled upon something far larger, a network of criminals masquerading as a literary society. They use publishing as a front for money laundering, blackmail, and worse." Poirot's mustache quivered with interest. "And Margaret Lorne, the vanished novelist? She is part of this?" Christie nodded. "Margaret was my protégée, in a way. She began investigating the Quill after noticing irregularities in her publisher's accounts. She came to me for advice, and I encouraged her to dig deeper. Too deep, it seems. When she vanished, I knew the Quill was behind it. I sent you the telegram because I needed someone I could trust, someone who could outwit them." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And you chose to frame this as a mystery, with a cryptic deadline and literary flourishes. Most theatrical, madame?" She laughed, a sound both warm and defiant. "I am a writer, monsieur. I couldn't resist a touch of drama. But the danger is real. The Quill plans to strike at the gala in 5 days. I don't know the target, possibly me, possibly someone else. But I have something that may help." She reached beneath her chair and produced a small, leather-bound diary, its cover embossed with a quill. A brass lock gleamed at its edge. "This contains everything I've learned about the Quill. Names, dates, transactions. But it's locked, and the key is elsewhere." Poirot took the diary, its weight surprisingly heavy in his hands. "And the key, madame? Where might I find it?" Her expression grew guarded. "Hidden in plain sight, just like their weapon. I've left clues in my latest manuscript, The Silent Quill. It's in my study, but I warn you, it's incomplete. And the clues are subtle. You'll need to read between the lines." Poirot's lips curled into a smile. "Madame, Hercule Poirot does not merely read between the lines, he rewrites them. I shall examine this manuscript. But first, tell me, who leads the Quill? A name, if you please." Christie hesitated, then leaned forward, her voice a whisper. "The publisher, Mr. Harrow. He's the linchpin. He controls their finances, their fronts. But he's clever, monsieur. He won't confess easily." Poirot's mind raced, recalling the publisher at Blackwood Manor, slipping a cryptic letter into his pocket. "Harrow," he murmured. "Oui, I have met this man. He is nervous." "Non? A man who fears exposure." He stood, clutching the diary. "I shall return, madame, with answers. But I urge you remain vigilant. The Quill is watching." As he turned to leave, a sudden screech of tires pierced the quiet. Poirot spun toward the window, his cane raised instinctively. A black motor car roared past, its headlights slicing through the dusk. A figure leaned from the passenger window, face obscured, and hurled something toward the house. Glass shattered as a brick crashed through the parlor window, landing on the rug with a thud. The maid screamed, and Christie leaped to her feet, her composure unbroken. Poirot darted to the brick, his gloved hands lifting it carefully. Tied to... It was a note, scrawled in red ink. The deadline approaches. Cease your meddling, or the final page will be yours. He met Christie's gaze, her eyes blazing with defiance. They grow bold, she said, but they underestimate us. Indeed, Poirot replied, slipping the note into his pocket. This is no longer a game of words, madame. It is a duel of wits. He bid her farewell, stepping into the chilly London night. The street was empty now, the motor car long gone, but Poirot's senses were alight. He hailed another taxi, directing it to his flat in Whitehaven Mansions. There, he would decode the diary and study Christie's manuscript. But first, he needed solitude, a glass of tisane, and the silence to let his little gray cells work their magic. At his flat, Poirot lit a single lamp, casting long shadows across his meticulously ordered parlor. He placed the diary on his desk, its lock glinting mockingly. The manuscript, the silent quill, had been delivered by Christie's maid shortly. After his departure, wrapped in brown paper and sealed with wax, he broke the seal, his fingers deft, and began to read. The manuscript was a labyrinth of prose, its plot mirroring the mystery at hand: a detective, a vanished writer, a secret society. But woven into the narrative were clues, phrases that seemed out of place, references to objects that held no apparent significance. A passage about a quill dipped in shadow caught his eye, followed by a description of a lock that opens to a poet's rhyme. Poirot's mind sparked. A rhyme? Could the key to the diary be a word, a phrase hidden in verse? He turned to the diary, examining the lock. It was no ordinary mechanism. Its face bore a series of letters, a cipher wheel. A combination, then, rather than a physical key. Poirot closed his eyes, recalling Christie's words, hidden in plain sight. He flipped through the manuscript again, searching for a poem. On page 47, he found it a sonnet titled The Quill's Lament. Its lines were elegant, but the final quatrain stood out. In shadows deep, where secrets dwell, a word unlocks the heart's own spell. 5 letters form the key to see the truth that sets the captive free. 5 letters. Poirot's fingers tapped the desk. He scanned the sonnet again, counting syllables, testing anagrams. Then it struck him quill. The word itself, 5 letters, the emblem of the society. He turned the cipher wheel, aligning the letters Q-U-I-L. A soft click echoed, and the diary sprang open. Inside, the pages were a treasure trove of secrets. Names, dates, sums of money transferred through shell companies disguised as publishing houses. Harrow's name appeared repeatedly, alongside. References to the final manuscript, a project the Quill believed would cement their power. But it was the first entry that stopped Poirot cold. January 12, 1925. Harrow is their kingpin, but he answers to another. A shadow within the Quill, known only as the scribe. Their identity is guarded, but their ambition is clear to silence any who threaten their empire. Margaret Lorne is in danger. I must act. Poirot leaned back, his mind a whirlwind. The scribe, a hidden mastermind, pulling Harrow's strings. And Margaret Lorne, still missing, was the key to exposing them. The gala loomed 5 days away, and the Quill's plan was nearing its climax. Poirot's gaze fell on the brick's note, still tucked in his pocket. The final page will be yours. A threat, yes, but also a clue. The weapon, the target, the motive, all were converging. He rose, pacing the room. The manuscript's clues, the diary's revelations, The journalist's confession. They formed a tapestry, intricate but incomplete. The quill's weapon, hidden in plain sight, was likely a literary object, a pen, a book, a letter. And the gala, with its glittering guest list, was the stage for their final act. Poirot's mustache twitched as he formulated a plan. He would confront Harrow, decode the remaining diary entries, and protect Christie. But first, he needed to ensure his own safety. A knock at the door startled him. He approached cautiously, cane in hand. Through the peephole, he saw Inspector Japp, his bowler hat askew, his face grim. Poirot opened the door. "Japp, mon ami, what brings you at this hour?" Japp stepped inside, his coat damp from the rain. "Trouble, Poirot. I got word from Gavin Harrow's vanished. Left his office in a hurry, and his staff say he's been acting strange. Nervous, like he's being watched. And there's more. Body was found near Blackwood Manor. Not Margaret Lorne, thank heavens, but a local bookseller. Stabbed with a fountain pen." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A fountain pen, you say?" "Mon Dieu, the weapon in plain sight." He handed Japp the diary. "Read this, Inspector. Harrow is no mere publisher. He is the quill's linchpin. But there is another, a scribe, who pulls the strings. We must find Harrow before the quill silences him." Japp skimmed the diary, his brow furrowing. "Blimey, Poirot, this is bigger than we thought. A criminal syndicate posing as writers? And Christie's mixed up in it?" "She is their target," Poirot said. "Or perhaps their bait. We must act swiftly. Tomorrow, I shall visit Harrow's office. You, mon ami, must investigate this bookseller's death. The pen is a message, a signature. The quill is taunting us." Japp nodded, scribbling in his notebook. "Right, I'll get my men on it. But Poirot, watch your back. If they're bold enough to throw bricks through Christie's window, they won't hesitate to come for you." Poirot smiled, a glint of steel in his eyes. "Let them. Come, Japp. Hercule Poirot is not so easily outwitted." As Japp left, Poirot returned to the diary, his fingers tracing the entries. The scribe's identity eluded him, but Harrow was the key. Tomorrow, he would confront the publisher, unravel the diary's secrets, and prepare for the gala. The deadline was approaching, and Poirot would not let the quill write the final page. The next morning, Poirot donned his finest suit, his lapel pin gleaming like a beacon. Harrow's office was in Bloomsbury, a stone's throw from the British Museum. Streets were alive with scholars and poets, their voices mingling with the clatter of typewriters from open windows. Poirot's taxi stopped outside a nondescript building, its sign reading Harrow & Sons Publishers. The door was ajar, the reception desk unmanned. Poirot's instincts prickled. He stepped inside, his cane tapping the floor. The office was a chaos of papers, manuscripts strewn across desks, contracts spilling from drawers. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, landing on a photograph of Harrow shaking hands with a masked figure at a literary event. The scribe? He moved to Harrow's desk, its surface cluttered with ink bottles and quills. A drawer, slightly ajar, revealed a ledger marked the final manuscript. Poirot opened it, his heart quickening. It detailed payments to a shell company. Quill press, and a single line stood out. Gala, midnight. The pen will write the end. A creak from the hallway snapped Poirot's attention. He slipped the ledger into his coat and moved silently to the door. A shadow passed, swift and deliberate. Poirot followed, his steps light, his cane ready. The figure, a man in a dark suit, darted into an alley behind the office. Poirot pursued, his heart pounding. The alley was narrow, lined with crates and refuse. The man turned, his face obscured by a scarf, and raised a pistol. "Monsieur." "Poirot," the man hissed, his voice muffled. You should have stayed in Devon." Poirot raised his cane, its silver head glinting. "And you, monsieur, should know that Hercule Poirot does not retreat. Lower your weapon, or I shall be forced to act." The man laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "The quill writes the story, not you." He fired, a shot echoing through the alley. Poirot dove behind a crate, the bullet splintering wood inches from his head. He rolled, his mind racing. The man advanced, but Poirot was quicker. He swung his cane, striking the man's wrist. The pistol clattered to the ground, and Poirot pounced, pinning the man against the wall. "Who is the scribe?" Poirot demanded, his voice like steel. "Speak, or you shall answer to Scotland Yard." The man struggled, then went limp. "You'll never stop us?" he spat. "The gala will be our triumph." Poirot bound the man's wrists with his own scarf, then searched his pockets. A card, embossed with a quill, bore a single word: midnight. He pocketed it and hailed a passing constable, handing the man over. "Take him to Inspector Japp," Poirot instructed, "and tell him Hercule Poirot has found another piece of the puzzle." Back at his flat, Poirot pored over the ledger and diary, cross-referencing names and dates. The quill's plan was clear: a murder at the gala, executed, with a weapon disguised as a literary tool. The fountain pen, perhaps, or something more subtle, a poisoned quill, a rigged book. And the target? Christie remained the most likely, but the MP and heiress could not be ruled out. The scribe's identity was the final piece, and Poirot suspected. Harrow knew it as night fell. Poirot lit a candle, its flame steady in the dark. He opened the silent quill again, searching for the next clue. A line in the final chapter caught his eye. "The scribe's mask is woven of words, but their truth lies in the silence." Silence. Poirot's mind flashed to the gala's guest list. The reclusive heiress, rarely seen, rarely heard. Could she be the scribe, hiding behind her wealth and anonymity? He closed the manuscript, his decision made. Tomorrow he would visit the heiress, confront Harrow if he could be found, and prepare for the gala. The quill's deadline was closing. But Poirot was ready. He sipped his tisane, a warmth calming his nerves. The game was not over, not yet. Hercule Poirot would write the final page, and the quill would fall. Chapter 9. The publisher's ploy. The morning air in London carried a damp chill, the kind that clung to the bones and made the city's cobblestones gleam under the weak November sun. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in his tailored overcoat, stood outside the offices of Harrow & Sons Publishing, a narrow, Georgian building squeezed between a tobacconist and a tea-room on Chancery Lane. His gloved hand rested lightly on his cane, its silver handle catching the light as he studied the brass plaque on the door. The name Harrow stared back at him, bold and unapologetic. Yet it was the man behind the name, Mr. Reginald Harrow, that set Poirot's little gray cells alight with suspicion. The decoded diary entry from Agatha Christie's locked journal had been unequivocal. Harrow was a leader in the quill, the shadowy literary society weaving a web of crime beneath the veneer of high culture. The diary's cryptic phrases, "the ink flows, the truth drowns," had pointed to Harrow's publishing empire as a front for something far darker than mere books. Poirot's discovery of the poisoned pen clue in the previous chapter had only sharpened his focus. A pen, he mused, was a writer's weapon, but in the hands of the quill it could be literal. His mustache twitched as he considered the audacity of such a plot. He pushed open the door, the bell above jingling like a warning. The interior was a study in contrasts. Polished oak shelves groaned under the weight of leather-bound volumes, their gold-embossed spines gleaming, while the air held a faint tang of ink and dust. A young clerk, bespectacled and nervous, looked up from a ledger. "May I help you, sir?" He squeaked, his voice betraying the unease of someone who sensed Poirot's presence was no mere courtesy call. "I am Hercule Poirot," he announced, his Belgian accent crisp, his tone carrying the weight of inevitability. "I wish to see Mr. Reginald Harrow. Immediately." The clerk's eyes widened, and he stammered, "Mr. Harrow is quite busy, sir. Perhaps an appointment." "Non, Poirot interrupted, raising a hand. "It is not a request. Tell him Poirot is here, and it concerns a matter of life and death." The clerk scurried off, disappearing behind a velvet curtain at the back of the room. Poirot's eyes roamed the office, noting the details. A framed portrait of a stern-faced man, presumably Harrow's father, founder of the firm. A glass case, displaying a first edition of And Then There Were None, signed by Agatha Christie herself. And a desk cluttered with manuscripts, their edges curling like secrets, unwilling to lie flat. His gaze lingered on a small bronze statuette of a quill pen, its nib glinting as if freshly dipped in ink. A symbol, perhaps, of the quill's arrogance. The curtain parted, and Reginald Harrow emerged, a man in his late 40s with slicked-back hair and a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. He wore a pinstriped suit, the cuffs of his shirt slightly frayed, a detail Poirot noted as a sign of a man stretched thin, perhaps by more than just business. "Mr. Poirot," Harrow said, extending a hand, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" Poirot did not take the hand. Instead, he fixed Harrow with a stare that seemed to peel back layers of pretense. "Monsieur Harrow, I am here to discuss a diary, one that names you in connection with a most unsavory organization. The Quill, I believe it is called." Harrow's smile faltered, a crack in the facade, but he recovered quickly, gesturing. "To a leather chair. Please sit. I'm afraid you've been misled by some fanciful tale. The Quill is merely a literary society, a gathering of like-minded enthusiasts. Nothing more." Poirot remained standing, his cane tapping lightly on the floor. "Enthusiasts, you say? Enthusiastic enough to threaten Madame Christie? To orchestrate the disappearance of Margaret Lorne? To speak of a fatal deadline and a poisoned pen?" His voice was soft, but each word landed like a dart. Harrow's face paled, and his fingers twitched toward a drawer in his desk. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "If you are reaching for a weapon, monsieur, I suggest you reconsider. I am not alone." It was a bluff Inspector Japp was still in Devon, tying up loose ends at Blackwood Manor, but Poirot's tone carried such authority that Harrow froze. "I don't know what you're talking about," Harrow said, his voice tight. "Diaries, threats, poisoned pens. It sounds like something out of one of Margaret's dreadful novels." "Then you will not mind if I examine your desk," Poirot said, stepping forward. "For, you see, I believe you have something to hide. A contract, perhaps? Or evidence of a transaction that is not quite literary." Harrow's eyes darted to the desk, a telltale sign. "You have no right." He snapped, but Poirot was already moving, his movements swift and precise despite his fastidious appearance. He pulled open the drawer, revealing a stack of papers. At the top was a contract, its title stark, The Unseen Manuscript. The publisher's name was Harrow and Sons, but the author's name was a pseudonym, Veritas Obscura. The sum listed was astronomical, far more than any book could justify. Poirot held up the contract, his expression one of quiet triumph. "A book that does not exist, monsieur? A curious way to conduct business. Unless, of course, this is a front for something else. Laundering money, perhaps? Financing the Quill's extracurricular activities?" Harrow lunged forward, snatching the contract from Poirot's hand. "You're meddling in things you don't understand," he shouted, his composure unraveling. He tore the contract in two, the pieces fluttering to the floor like fallen leaves. "Get out, or I'll have you thrown out." Poirot's smile was serene, unshaken. "Tear as many papers as you like, Monsieur Harrow. The truth, it does not burn so easily." He bent to retrieve the torn contract, slipping it into his pocket. "I will take my leave, but know this, I am watching you. And the quill." As he turned to go, Poirot's eyes caught a glint on the desk, the bronze quill statuette. He paused, his fingers brushing its surface. "A fine piece?" he said casually. "A symbol of your trade, no doubt, or perhaps a reminder of something more dangerous?" Harrow's silence was answer enough. Poirot tipped his hat and exited, the bell jingling behind him. The street outside was bustling, but his mind was elsewhere, piecing together the puzzle. The contract was a clue, but it was the mention of the poisoned pen that gnawed at him. A literal weapon? A metaphor? Or both? He hailed a cab, directing it to the British Library, where he intended to research Veritas Obscura. The pseudonym was Latin, hidden truth, and Poirot suspected it was no coincidence. As the cab rattled through London streets, he unfolded the torn contract, studying its details. The shell company listed as the recipient of the funds was Obscura Press, with an address at a dockside warehouse in Limehouse. The pieces were aligning, but the picture remained incomplete dot at the library. Poirot charmed the librarian, a stern woman with a penchant for order, into granting him access to the restricted archives. He pored over records of publishing houses, cross-referencing Obscura Press. The company was a ghost-registered, but with no publications, no employees, no trace beyond a postbox in Limehouse. "A shell, indeed," Poirot murmured, his pencil tapping his notebook. But a shell for what? Money laundering was likely, but the quill's ambitions seemed grander control, power, perhaps even murder. His thoughts were interrupted by a shadow falling across the table. A man in a gray overcoat stood nearby, pretending to browse a shelf. Poirot's instincts prickled. The man's posture was too stiff, his glances too deliberate. A tale, no doubt, sent by Harrow or the quill. Closed his notebook, slipped it into his coat, and rose, feigning nonchalance. He exited the library, the man following at a discreet distance. The streets of Bloomsbury were alive with students and scholars, but Poirot's focus was razor-sharp. He led his pursuer on a circuitous route, ducking into an alley behind a bookshop. When the man rounded the corner, Poirot was waiting, cane raised like a fencer's foil. "Bonjour, monsieur," he said, his voice icy. "You follow Hercule Poirot. Why?" The man, broad-shouldered and unshaven, smirked. "Just talking a walk, mate. A walk that mirrors my own? Non, non. You are with the quill, are you not?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with certainty. The man hesitated and lunged, a knife flashing in his hand. Poirot sidestepped, his cane cracking against the man's wrist. The knife clattered to the ground, and Poirot pinned the man against the wall, his small frame belying his strength. "Speak," Poirot commanded. "Who sent?" "You? Harrow?" The man spat, but fear flickered in his eyes. "Harrow's just a cog," he muttered. "The quill's bigger than him. You're poking a hornet's nest, detective. And you, monsieur, are a hornet who will sting no more." Poirot retrieved the knife, a wickedly sharp blade etched with a tiny quill symbol. He pocketed it, then stepped back, allowing the man to flee. Pursuit was unnecessary. The man's words confirmed Harrow's role as a pawn, not a king. The true mastermind remained hidden. Poirot returned to his flat, his mind racing. The torn contract, the shell company, the poisoned pen, the thug in the alley, all pointed to a conspiracy that reached beyond Harrow. He sat at his desk, lighting a single candle, its flame casting shadows on the walls. He opened Agatha Christie's diary, its leather cover worn but sturdy. and reread the decoded entry. Harrow leads, but another pulls the strings. The pen is mightier than the sword, but poisoned, it kills both writer and reader. The words chilled him. He poured a glass of tisane, sipping it slowly as he considered his next move. Harrow's panic suggested he was cornered, but his death or disappearance would serve the quill's purpose, severing a link in the chain. Poirot resolved to confront Harrow again, but not at his office. The warehouse in Limehouse, the address. On the contract was the logical destination. It was a risk, but Poirot thrived on risks calculated with precision. The next morning, he dressed in a less conspicuous suit gray, not his usual black, and hired a nondescript cab to Limehouse. The docks were a labyrinth of crates and cranes, the air thick with the smell of tar and salt water. The warehouse, a hulking structure of rusted iron, stood at the end of a narrow street. Its windows were boarded, its door padlocked, but Poirot's. Keen eyes spotted a fresh scratch on the lock, a sign of recent entry. He circled the building, finding a loose board at the rear. With surprising agility, he slipped inside, his cane ready. The interior was dim, lit only by slivers of light through the boards. Crates were stacked high, labeled with innocuous terms, books, stationery. But one crate, half open, revealed not books, but bundles of cash, wrapped in paper bands stamped with a quill. Poirot's heart quickened. This was no mere publishing scam. It was a financial empire. He moved deeper, his footsteps silent on the dusty floor. A faint sound, a rustle, a muffled curse came from a corner office. He approached, peering through a crack in the door. Harrow stood inside, frantically stuffing papers into a briefcase. Beside him was a woman, her face obscured by a hooded cloak, her voice low and urgent. "You've botched it, Reginald," she hissed. "Poirot's too close. We need to move the operation." Harrow's reply was a whine. "I didn't sign." "Up for murder. You said it was just money?" Silence. The woman snapped. "The quill doesn't tolerate failure. Finish the manuscript, or you're the one who'll be erased." Poirot's mind raced. The woman's voice was familiar. Had he heard it at Blackwood Manor? The playwright, perhaps, or the rival author. Before he could decide, Harrow turned, spotting the glint of Poirot's cane through the crack. "Someone's here!" he shouted. Poirot stepped back, but the woman was faster. She drew a pistol, its barrel gleaming in the dim light. "Show yourself," she demanded. Poirot raised his hands, stepping into the office with a calm smile. "Madame, there is no need for violence. Hercule Poirot is merely here to discuss literature." The woman's eyes narrowed, but she didn't fire. Harrow, however, was a wreck, his hands trembling as he clutched the briefcase. "You," he gasped, "you're ruining everything." "On the contrary," Poirot said, his voice smooth as silk. "I am saving you, Monsieur Harrow. From the quill, from this woman, from yourself. Tell me, who is she? The true leader of your little society?" The woman laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "You're clever, Poirot, but not clever enough." She raised the pistol, but Poirot was ready. With a flick of his cane, he knocked a stack of crates onto her, the wood splintering. As she fell, Harrow bolted for the door, but Poirot was faster, tripping him with a deft movement. The briefcase spilled open, revealing not just papers, but a single, ornate fountain pen, its nib stained with a faint green residue. "The poisoned pen," Poirot said, picking it up carefully. "Cyanide, I presume? A fitting weapon for the quill." The woman struggled free, her hood falling to reveal the face of Eleanor Vance, the rival author from Blackwood Manor. Her eyes burned with defiance. "You'll never stop us," she spat. "The quill is everywhere." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but today it is you who are stopped." He pocketed the pen and bound Eleanor's hands with a cord from the crates, his movements precise. Harrow, sobbing, offered no resistance as Poirot escorted them to the street, where a passing constable was summoned. He felt a pang of unease. Eleanor's words echoed. The quill is everywhere. Harrow was a pawn, Eleanor a lieutenant, but the true mastermind remained at large. The warehouse held answers, but also dangers. He glanced at the pen in his pocket, its weight a reminder of the deadline ticking closer. The chapter closed with Poirot standing on the dock, the Thames flowing dark and silent behind him. He had the pen, the contract, and 2 conspirators, but the gala was 3 days away, and the quill's plan was still in motion. His little gray cells hummed, undaunted. The game, as Madame Christie might say, was afoot. Chapter 10. The warehouse trapped the fog, clung to the Devon coast like a conspirator, muffling the world in a damp, gray shroud. Hercule Poirot adjusted his overcoat, the chill seeping through the fine wool as he stood at the edge of the dockside, staring at the looming silhouette of the warehouse. Its rusted iron walls and sagging roof suggested abandonment, but Poirot's little gray cells whispered otherwise. This was no derelict ruin. It was a stage, and he was about to step into the spotlight of a deadly performance. The night was alive, with subtle sounds, the lapping of waves against the pier, the creak of a distant buoy, and the faint hum of a generator somewhere within the warehouse. Poirot's gloved hand tightened around the cryptic clue he'd found in Mr. Harrow's office. Scrap of paper with the words, "The poisoned pen awaits at the dock's end." His mustache twitched as he considered the theatricality of it. All, the quill, with their literary obsession, could not resist weaving their crimes into a narrative. And now, Poirot was determined to rewrite their ending. Inspector Japp, ever the loyal shadow, stood beside him, his breath visible in the cold air. "This place gives me the creeps, Poirot," he muttered, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. "You sure about this?" "Harrow's a slippery one. Could be a trap." "Mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice calm but laced with a quiet. "Fire. A trap is only dangerous if one does not expect it. And Hercule Poirot is never unprepared." He tapped his temple lightly. "The little gray cells, they are already mapping the stage." Japp grunted, unconvinced but trusting. "Right. So, what's the plan? We can't just waltz in there." Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dim light of a nearby gas lamp. "We do not waltz, Inspector. We glide, with precision and purpose. Follow me, and stay alert. The quill plays a game of shadows, but shadows always betray their source." They moved silently along the pier, their footsteps muffled by the fog. The warehouse loomed closer, its windows dark save for a faint flicker of light in one corner. Poirot paused, his keen senses picking up the scent of salt and something sharper chemical. Acrid. He crouched, examining the ground, and found a faint trail of ink splattered on the cobblestones, leading toward a side entrance. "Interesting," he murmured. "The pen, it seems, has already begun to write." The side door was ajar, its hinges rusted but recently oiled, betraying recent use. Poirot pushed it open with the tip of his cane, peering into the cavernous interior. The warehouse was a labyrinth of crates and barrels, their shapes distorted by the flickering light of a single lantern hanging from a beam. The air was heavy with the smell of damp wood and something metallic blood, perhaps, or something more sinister. "Stay close," Poirot whispered, stepping inside. Japp followed, his revolver now drawn, his eyes scanning the shadows. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water from the leaking roof. Poirot's gaze darted to a stack of crates marked with a familiar symbol. A quill encircled by a serpent, the emblem of the quill. He gestured for Japp to cover him as he approached, his fingers tracing the symbol. Beneath it, carved into the wood, was a single word: Deadline. Before Poirot could ponder further, a soft thud echoed from the far end of the warehouse. Japp tensed, but Poirot raised a hand, signaling patience. He moved toward the sound, his steps deliberate, his cane tapping lightly against the floor. The lantern's light revealed a narrow corridor formed by towering crates, leading to a small clearing. And there, slumped against a barrel, was Mr. Harrow. The publisher's face was ashen, his eyes wide with a frozen terror. A fountain pen protruded from his chest, its tip buried deep, a faint trickle of dark liquid pooling on his shirt. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers carefully examining the scene. "Cyanide," he said softly, noting the faint almond-like scent. The poisoned pen, indeed. Japp cursed under his breath. They got to him first. But why leave the body here? It's too neat, Poirot. Too staged. Precisement, Poirot agreed, his eyes narrowing. This is not the end of the act, but the beginning. De Quille wishes us to find this tableau. They are watching, mon ami. We must play our parts with care. As if on cue, a faint rustle came from above. Poirot's head snapped up, catching the glint of movement in the rafters. "Inspector, behind you!" he shouted, just as a figure dropped from above, a blade flashing in the lantern light. Japp spun, his revolver barking once, twice. The figure a masked man in black stumbled, clutching his shoulder, and vanished into the maze of crates. "After him!" Japp roared, but Poirot grabbed his arm. "No, Inspector. He is but a pawn, and we are not here to chase shadows. There is something else here, someone else." His gaze fell on a trapdoor half hidden beneath a pile of sacks. He swept them aside with his cane, revealing a rusted handle. "The true plot lies below." Japp hesitated, then nodded, holstering his revolver. "You're the boss, Poirot. But if this goes south, I'm blaming you." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Blame is a luxury we cannot afford, mon ami. Now assist me." Together, they pried open the trapdoor, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A faint glow flickered below, accompanied by the soft clatter of a typewriter. Poirot's heart quickened. "The author of this drama is still at work," he murmured, descending the stairs with Japp close behind. The staircase opened into a cramped subterranean room, its walls lined with shelves of manuscripts and maps. A single bulb swung overhead, casting wild shadows across a wooden desk where a woman sat, her fingers frozen above the typewriter keys. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, but Poirot recognized her instantly. Margaret Lorne, the vanished novelist. "Mademoiselle Lorne," Poirot said, his voice gentle but firm. "You have written a most intriguing chapter, but I fear it is time to close the book." Margaret's hands trembled as she stood, knocking over a stack of papers. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I didn't expect. How did you find me?" "The little gray cells, they do." "Not rest," Poirot replied, stepping closer. "And the Quille, they are not as clever as they believe. You faked your disappearance, did you not? To escape their grasp?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "They forced me to write for them, manuscripts to cover their crimes. When I discovered their plan to kill Agatha Christie, I couldn't stay silent. I staged my disappearance, but they found me. Harrow was their enforcer, but now—" Her gaze darted to the staircase, fear etched into her features. "They're coming. For me, for you." Japp stepped forward, his revolver drawn again. "Let him try. We've got you now, Miss Lorne. You're safe." Poirot shook his head. "Safety, Inspector, is an illusion until the Quille is undone. Mademoiselle, tell me of this plan." "The gala, the fountain pen. What is their design?" Margaret swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. They planned to kill Agatha at the literary gala in 3 days. The pen, the one that killed Harrow, it's a prototype. They've rigged a fountain pen with a cyanide needle, hidden in the nib. She'd be asked to sign a book during her speech. And her voice broke. It's meant to look like an accident. Poirot's eyes gleamed with a fierce intensity. A pen, the weapon of a writer, turned to murder. How poetic. But poetry, it can be rewritten. He picked up the deadly pen from Harrow's body, now safely tucked into an evidence bag Japp had provided. Its sleek design belied its lethal purpose, a masterpiece of deception. Before he could say more, the room shook with a sudden crash above. Footsteps thundered on the warehouse floor, accompanied by shouted orders. "They've found us," Margaret gasped, clutching Poirot's arm. "They'll kill us all." "Calm yourself, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice steady as steel. "The stage is set, but the curtain has not yet fallen. Inspector, guard the stairs. Mademoiselle, stay behind me." Japp positioned himself at the base of the staircase, his revolver trained on the trapdoor. Poirot scanned the room, his mind racing. The manuscripts on the shelves caught his eye, each a meticulously crafted cover for the Quill's crimes, from extortion to murder. He grabbed a handful, tucking them into his coat. "Evidence, mon ami," he said to Japp. "The Quills. Story will be their undoing." The trapdoor burst open, and 3 figures in black cloaks descended, their faces hidden behind quill-shaped masks. Japp fired a warning shot, the bullet ricocheting off the stone wall. "Stop right there," he bellowed. The leader of the trio laughed, a cold, theatrical sound. "You're out of your depth, detective. And you, Poirot, are meddling in a plot far grander than your little gray cells can fathom." Poirot stepped forward, his cane pointed like a rapier. "On the contrary, monsieur, it is you who underestimate. Your plot is a cliché, your motives transparent. Surrender now, and perhaps the law will be lenient." The leader sneered, raising a pistol. "The Quill writes the ending, not you." Before he could fire, Poirot flicked his cane, knocking a shelf of manuscripts onto the intruders. The heavy tomes crashed down, scattering the cloaked figures. Japp seized the moment, tackling one to the ground, while Poirot pulled Margaret toward a side passage she'd pointed out earlier, a smuggler's tunnel leading to the shore. "Run, mademoiselle," Poirot urged, guiding her into the damp, narrow tunnel. Japp followed, dragging the captured Quill member, whose mask had fallen to reveal a young man with a scar across his cheek. The tunnel echoed with the shouts of the remaining pursuers, their footsteps growing closer. The passage opened onto a rocky beach, where a small rowboat bobbed in the surf. Poirot helped Margaret aboard, his eyes scanning the fog for signs of pursuit. Japp shoved the prisoner into the boat, securing his wrists with handcuffs. "You're not going anywhere," he growled out as Poirot pushed the boat into the water. A gunshot rang out, splintering the wood near his hand. He ducked, urging Japp to row. "Vite, Inspector! The tide is with us, but the Quill is not." The boat glided into the fog, the warehouse fading into the mist. Margaret clutched the manuscripts Poirot had saved, her face a mix of fear and resolve. "They'll come for me again," she whispered. "They won't stop until Agatha is dead." Poirot's mustache twitched as he held up the evidence bag containing the poisoned pen. "Let them come, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot has their weapon, their secrets, and 3 days to rewrite their tragedy into a triumph. The gala will be their final act." The boat vanished into the fog, carrying Poirot, Margaret, Japp, and their prisoner towards safety. So they hoped. The deadline loomed, and the Quill's shadow stretched long across the Devon coast. But Poirot's little gray cells were alight with purpose, and he knew the story was far from over.